What's the worst that could happen on an airplane? Maybe this. There's not enough oxygen to survive up here. A freezing wind of hurricane force is roaring through the cabin.
Aloha!
The flight crew call Mayday, but nobody hears. And the airplane is headed for a mountain. It sounds like a nightmare. For everyone aboard Aloha Airlines Flight 243, this is no nightmare, it's reality.
Aloha 243 is still up.
When crash detectives discover what happened, their verdict shakes the airline business.
This accident changed aviation history.
Some people choose to trespass in that narrow space between life and death. It's a scary place to be. Surfers get there by chasing killer waves. Just occasionally, fate puts ordinary people, not just thrill seekers, into that same deadly zone, where life hangs by a thread. On the afternoon of April 28, 1988, it will happen in the sky over Hawaii. At 1 p.m., Aloha Airlines Flight 243 is preparing to depart. A Boeing 737 is on the tarmac at Hilo Airport on Hawaii's Big Island, the southernmost of the Hawaii chain. Flight 243 will be just a 35-minute hop to Honolulu on the island of Oahu. Serving the islands means that Aloha works its airplanes hard. They make short flights, but plenty of them. This airplane has been shuttling between the islands since early morning. It'll be its 9th flight today. For the flight crew, it's a routine they've followed for many years.
Aloha 243. Roger. We're anticipating.
Captain Bob Schornsteimer has been flying for 11 years with Aloha Airlines.
Roger.
His first officer, Mimi Tompkins, is hoping for promotion to captain after almost 9 years with Aloha.
Did you hear any more about...
Each of the flight attendants has a long service record too, but none so long as Clarabelle Lansing, known to everyone as just CB.
Well, Mr. Kiner, welcome.
Always good to see you, CB. You fixed some good weather for us.
Smooth all the way.
You bet.
She's been flying for 37 years, since before the days of the first jet airliner.
Let me help you with this.
Oh, yeah.
CB is the boss in the cabin, first flight attendant. Michelle Honda, a 14-year veteran, is number 2. Jane Sato Tomita has served 19 years. This is one of the most experienced crews you'll find, in an airplane that's been crisscrossing Hawaii's islands safely for 19 years.
Circuit breakers.
It's made more than 89,000 flights. On this day, only one other 737 in the entire world beats that record.
Checked.
Passengers have no reason to doubt they're in safe hands. Until one passenger, Gail Yamamoto, sees something that makes her pause. But what is it she's concerned about? And how worried should she be?
Do I say something?
Patricia Aubrey lives in Hilo, but has an appointment today in Honolulu. At first, she opts for the very front of the airplane, in row 1. But somehow she feels uneasy and decides to move further back. She chooses a free seat in row 17. At 1:25, Flight 243 is ready for takeoff. This airplane often rattles and shakes on takeoff and landing, but it's something the crew and regular passengers have grown used to. What's there to worry about?
Yellow departure. This is Aloha 243, climbing through 3000.
Roger, climbing to flight...
Though he's the captain, Bob Schornsteimer has chosen to take charge of radio links with air traffic control. It's Mimi Tompkins who'll fly the plane to Honolulu. Most of the flight time is taken up in climbing to their cruising altitude. It'll take 20 minutes to climb to 7,300 meters. For many passengers, soaring high over the Pacific is all part of the daily routine. People like salesman Howard Kitaoka in row 5, he makes this trip often. When you've seen the view 100 times, 35 minutes is precious time to catch up on paperwork. The flight's so short that the attendants serve drinks while they're still climbing. They can move around, but the passengers are still strapped in. It's 1:45. 20 minutes into the flight, the aircraft is at cruising height.
Honolulu Center, Aloha 243, leveling off at 240.
The crew relax.
See, where's that National Weather Service weather station out here? Is that in the old tower?
In perfect flying weather, everything is following the familiar pattern.
Do they?
What's that?
How to get down?
We've lost pressure.
I saw a brilliant flash of light and boom.
Everything was being sucked out of the plane.
Here's what's happened. An explosive decompression has torn away 35 square meters of fuselage.
We were in a tremendous blast of wind. The wind blast was unbelievable.
A mass of things just went whoosh out the plane. You know, hair was up here. Everybody was in their seat except the stewardesses. I saw the stewardess get smashed down in the aisle. I could see her hair blowing and I could see blood, but that's all I could see of her.
Jane Sato Tomita has been struck by debris at row 2. Michelle Honda has been thrown to the floor at row 15. There's no sign at all of CB Lansing.
I will take control column.
I can't hear you!
Only seconds have passed since the explosion. The wind noise makes it impossible for the flight crew to communicate.
Move back
I
there.
can't hear you!
We've lost pressure.
Now, for the first time, they gain a sense of what's happened. Visible over a mound of tangled debris, there's blue sky where the airplane roof used to be. The first 5 rows are now completely exposed to the sky on both sides of the plane. The initial threat of being sucked out is past since the airplane's now completely depressurized. But passengers are still in danger.
My seatmate was flopping out outside the aircraft because at that point it was just the floor and no walls or seating. And so I grabbed him.
The cold and oxygen deprivation are both potentially deadly.
Just imagine the scene up there. The top of the airplane broken off. The passengers don't have any ability to get supplemental oxygen because the critical tubing that feeds that oxygen is now gone. And at 24,000 feet, with very little to breathe up there, the passengers become incapacitated. That's called hypoxia. If you stay up at that altitude for any prolonged period of time, you become more and more physically disabled. With the top of the airplane gone, you now have 300-mile-an-hour winds blowing into that cabin. That's 3 times hurricane-force winds. Those people were dressed for Hawaii in the springtime, not minus 50-degree temperatures. Any period of time at 24,000 feet, and those people will die.
High above the Pacific Ocean, an extraordinary drama is unfolding. An explosion at 7,300 meters aboard a Boeing 737 bound for the Hawaiian island of Oahu tears 35 square meters of fuselage from the airplane, exposing passengers to the sky. The cabin is depressurized with no emergency oxygen supply. Unless they rapidly reach a lower altitude where they can breathe again, the passengers will die. Captain Bob Schornsteimer takes over command of the aircraft from First Officer Mimi Tompkins. He begins an emergency descent, dropping 1,200 meters per minute, its speed now increasing to more than 500 kilometers an hour. As the aircraft hurtles down, passengers face a new terror. Wreckage blocks their view of the cockpit, and when the airplane split apart, the nose dropped down by around 1 meter. The plane is held together by just the narrow floor beams.
The floor was buckling up, and you could tell the plane was bending in the middle.
Michelle Honda can't go forward far enough to see whether the pilots are alive or dead. She tries to make contact via the intercom.
Can anyone hear me?
The wires are severed. As she struggles forward to try to reach the cockpit, she gets asked the one question she can't answer.
Do we have a pilot?
I don't know.
Do we have a pilot?
I do not know. Can you fly a plane?
The terror of those on board can only be imagined as she asks the one question no airplane passenger wants to hear.
Can you fly a plane?
Michelle Honda was coming up and cupping her hands and yelling in everyone's ear individually, "Can you fly a plane?" I was like, what? You know, get out of here. Is the pilot gone too? You know, because you couldn't tell if there was anybody up there.
Do you know how to fly a plane?
No!
First Officer Mimi Tompkins tries to alert air traffic control at Honolulu. Recordings from the cockpit voice recorder, the black box, analyzed later by accident investigators, provide a dramatic record of exactly what took place. The nearest place where they can try to land is the island of Maui. Kahului Airport lies between two volcanic mountains. Between them and safety lies a 3,000-meter-high summit. To fly from the location of the explosion to the safety of Kahului Airport, the pilot needs to carefully maneuver, avoiding this high ground. Can the fragile aircraft survive the stresses of turning, or, if they ever reach the airport, of landing? And how can those on board survive? Jane Sato Tomita is barely conscious. Howard Kitaoka clutches her hand. The only faint sign of life is once when Jane squeezes back.
I'm not exactly sure if she was conscious, but I did manage to squeeze her hand, and she responded by squeezing my hand, and we just held hands. The simple squeeze of the hand at a time like that is very, very emotional.
Aloha 243. Do you read me?
Mimi Tompkins is not getting through to Honolulu Air Traffic Control, so she switches to the frequency for the tower at Maui's Kahului Airport.
Maui Tower. Aloha 243. Maui Tower. Aloha 243.
Aircraft calling tower, say again.
Aloha 243. For inbound landing.
At 1:48, 3 minutes after the explosion, the crew make their first voice contact with the ground.
Pressurized. Declaring an emergency.
Aloha 243, say your position.
Forgiveness. To the east of Makita Point. Descending out of 11,000. Request clearance into Maui for landing. Request the emergency equipment.
Airport fire station?
We have an Aloha 737 5 minutes out.
Approximately 20 miles. Cleared to runway 02. Decompression problems.
Pilot is declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mawitar. In the station. Attention in the station. We have an in-flight emergency. We have a 737, 5 minutes out, 20 miles. Runway 2. Souls on board, crew on board is unknown. It has decompression problems at this time. Runway 2.
Aloha 243. Okay, the equipment is on the field. It's on the way.
At 3,000 meters, flying west of the mountain, the pilot slows the aircraft and as gently as possible begins the right-hand turn towards Kahului. Passengers sense that someone must be in control of the aircraft.
I've had some training as a pilot, and we were wings level. It wasn't in a dive or a roll, it was wings level. At that moment, I thought, we have a chance.
Meanwhile, those on the ground are unsure about what kind of crisis they're facing. It's a small airport. An airliner in trouble will test the fire crew's experience. For the air controller, it's hard to hear the airplane at all.
Just to verify again, you're breaking up. Your call sign is 243. Is that correct?
Or 244.
Aloha 243! Aloha 243!
Aloha 243.
Plan straight ahead for runway 02. I'll keep you advised of any wind change.
Four minutes after the explosion. At this lower altitude, they're able to remove their oxygen masks. With their speed having dropped to a little over 380 kilometers an hour, the wind noise decreases just enough for them to hear one another.
You want me to call for anything else?
No.
Aloha 243. Looks like we've lost a door. We have a hole in the left side of the aircraft.
But the tower can't hear this new information. They've lost contact with the aircraft. Their transmissions aren't being picked up.
Aloha 243, you still up?
Is this a radio malfunction or something worse?
Aloha 243.
Hearing nothing from the stricken aircraft, the controller fears the worst.
Aloha 243.
Aloha 243, you still up?
Aloha 243, if you still hear, please
Ident.
Affirmative.
Aloha 243, roger. I got your ident straight away. Cleared to land, wind 040
at 20 knots.
Communication is restored, but the crew's ordeal is far from over.
Cabin, do you hear?
Now Mimi Tompkins tries to contact the cabin by intercom, but there's no response.
Well, the crew doesn't really know what's going on behind them. The airplane is still flying. The captain now has to maintain his focus on flying that airplane, but he doesn't know what real damage exists behind him.
Tell him we'll need assistance to evacuate.
Right. Maui Tower, Aloha 243. Can you hear me on tower frequency?
Aloha 243, I hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
We're going to need assistance. We can't communicate with the flight attendants. We'll need assistance with the passengers when we land.
Okay, you're going to need an ambulance, is that correct?
Affirmative.
During the descent, passengers experience moments of pure terror.
The plane kept vibrating and shaking, and the luggage racks were falling in, and there was electrical wires flying around zapping, and you know, pretty much pandemonium, but it looked like the plane was ripping in half.
And suddenly, there's a new problem for the flight crew to handle.
Feels like manual reversion.
What?
The flight controls feel like manual reversion.
It feels to the pilot as though hydraulic systems, like power steering in an automobile, have now failed. The airframe is under great stress. They need to land as soon as possible.
Can we maintain altitude okay?
There are so many thoughts that go through your head. Like one of my thoughts was, man, don't put this thing in the water. I mean, you have people around you are hurt, unconscious. I didn't want to have to say, well, I'm gonna try to save this guy first or that guy first, whatever. And don't put it on the water.
The crew fear that critical wiring and control cables may have been severed. Have any of the airplane's vital parts been damaged?
Let's try flying with the gear down.
All right, you've got it.
There are lights to indicate whether or not the landing gear has safely deployed. The main undercarriage has extended as normal. But the light showing that the nose wheel has extended doesn't come on.
The last thing the pilot wanted to see, especially with his airplane in the condition it was in, was that he didn't have a nose gear, because when the nose touched down on the runway, it would have broken the airplane apart, therefore breaking probably the fuel tanks apart, which could lead to a very dramatic fire and explosion.
A second attempt to extend the landing gear. The nose gear light is still out, but the radio link is so bad, the tower is still trying to assimilate the crisis.
Aloha 243.
Just to verify, you do need an ambulance, is that correct?
They still don't understand. Affirmative.
Roger, how many do you think are injured?
We have no idea. We can't communicate with the flight attendants.
Okay, we'll have the ambulance on the way.
There's a possibility that we won't have a nose gear.
Now Bob Schornsteimer has to make a critical decision. Should he wait for confirmation that the undercarriage is down, or land anyway?
The textbook in this case would tell the pilots to overfly the airfield so that the air traffic controllers can look at the landing gear and give them a report whether it's up or down. The pilots would then have to maneuver the airplane all the way around the airfield, come in for an approach, and land.
But with an airplane which might break apart at any moment, that's out of the question.
Tell them we've got problems. But we're gonna land anyway, even without a nose gear. But they should be aware that we don't have a nose gear indication down.
Aloha 243.
Wind now 050. The emergency equipment is in place.
Okay, be advised, we have no nose gear. We are landing with no nose gear.
Okay, if you need any other assistance,
Advise.
We'll need all the equipment you've got.
Maui is not an ideal place to head for with the damaged airplane. The island's exposed north shore lies directly in the path of the trade winds.
I've done that landing a lot of times, and that particular approach corridor is very windy because of the mountain on one side and mountain on the other. So it's a very bumpy approach. But that's basically all we had.
Get in a brace position. Brace yourself, get down.
Any kind of in-flight turbulence, that would have put great stresses on the front end of the airplane, and there's a high probability that the cockpit would have separated from the rest of the fuselage, catastrophic loss of the airplane, and a loss of life.
With the airfield now in sight, Bob Schornsteimer has more critical decisions to make. He begins to slow the aircraft for landing.
Let's try flaps 15.
An airplane's flaps are sliding panels at the back of the wings. To increase lift at low speeds, they need to be extended during takeoff and landing.
Is it easier to control with the flaps up?
Yeah. Put them back to 5. Can you give me a V speed for a flap 5 landing?
No two aircraft landings are the same. Pilots have to factor in many things: the wind speed and direction, passenger and fuel load, and the length of the runway before them.
Do you want the flaps right down as we land?
What?
Do you want the flaps right down as we land?
Yeah. But after we touch down.
Okay.
A complicated formula provides the VREF, indicating the safe landing speed. Even in a crisis like this, pilots have to reach for the manual. Extending the flaps fully will help act as a brake once they touch down, but to do it earlier could stress the airframe to breaking point.
What you have to remember is that the pilots weren't trained to handle a situation like this. With the top of their airplane missing, they became test pilots. The aerodynamic effects of the airplane were drastically different than they were used to. They really had to fly by the seat of their pants.
Aloha 243, wind now 050.
At 20.
VREF 40 plus 30, flap 1 through flaps 15.
120?
Using her flight manual, the first officer makes the complicated calculation that will give their correct landing speed.
Right.
The safe speed for landing, taking into account the length of Kahalui's runway 2, is calculated to be 152 knots, 282 kilometers an hour. As the airplane slows, it becomes much harder to control. And so the pilot has to make another crucial call. Speeding up to keep control means he'll hit the runway faster than he should. He gambles that the higher speed landing is still the best option.
Our approach speed, I felt, was hot. I mean, we were coming in hot. I don't know, don't ask me how many miles an hour it was, because I don't know. But from other landings, we were coming in fairly hot.
Crash rescue teams prepare themselves for a worst-case scenario. At high speed and without the nose gear, a crash landing followed by a catastrophic fuel fire now seems inevitable.
Under these conditions, the lack of a nose gear could have been a death sentence for everybody aboard this aircraft.
A Boeing 737 with 95 people on board has suffered an explosive decompression near the Hawaiian island of Maui. It's still airborne, but only just, with 35 square meters of fuselage missing from the Aloha plane. As they prepare for an emergency landing, warning lights indicate that the forward landing gear has not deployed. If so, the airplane will most likely crash and burn. In the 12 horrifying minutes since the explosion, some passengers are convinced they're not going to make it alive.
I thought he was going to go in the water, and I was eaten by sharks. And then we saw the mountain, and I didn't think we were going to make it over it. I just knew we were going to crash into that mountain. And then when we could tell, we could see the airport, and then, you know, then I burned to death because the plane blew up when we hit the runway.
Suddenly, the news the pilots have been praying for.
The gear is down. Inform Colwyn Command, the gear is down.
Okay, thanks. Aloha 243, just for your information, the gear appears
Down. The gear appears down.
Want me to go to flaps 40? Help you?
No, on the ground.
The crew have had to make life or death decisions. In the next few seconds, they'll find out whether they're the right ones. Michelle Honda cradles her injured colleague as the critical moment approaches. Passengers comfort one another in what may be their last moments alive.
A woman that was sitting next to me, and her husband, he was on the other side in the next row up, and she was next to me, and they were reaching their hands out, and they were trying to touch fingers to say goodbye. That was a really touching moment for me. It was when I really knew I was going to die, because they were saying goodbye to each other.
What gave me the most comfort was knowing that my wife and my kids knew what I felt. That was great comfort. I didn't need to tell them anything further, that I love you, or, you know, I worry about you, because I felt that I had already said that.
Though the forward undercarriage has extended, the crew still can't be certain whether it is locked in place or whether it'll collapse on landing. If it doesn't hold firm, 40,000 kilos of airplane traveling at close to 320 kilometers an hour will smash nose down onto the tarmac.
One reverse.
Okay.
Thrust reverser.
Aloha 243, just
Shut it down where you are.
Okay.
everything's fine. The gear did it. The fire trucks are on the way.
Okay, shut it down.
Yeah? Oh, God.
In this extraordinary video, captured moments after landing, the amount of damage the airplane suffered is difficult to comprehend. An emergency evacuation of passengers who escaped injury has just been completed. Some injured passengers have still to be helped from the plane. How it flew for those 13 terrifying minutes seems astonishing. Captain Bob Schornsteimer is thanked by passengers who just minutes before had expected to die. The tension is released.
Boy, I just said, yes, baby. That's all I said. Pilot did a tremendous job.
Patricia Aubrey hugs her heroine, Michelle Honda.
I was crying, and of course everybody was traumatized. looking at the plane and looking at the people bleeding, and just, I kept touching myself going, I'm here. I can't believe I'm still alive.
Her last-minute impulse to switch seats saves her from injury, maybe from death.
Something was telling me not to sit there, because I didn't have a good reason to move, you know. My guardian angel was tapping me on the shoulder and telling me to move.
A final desperate head count by Michelle Honda confirms the crew's worst fears. C.B. Lansing, the veteran of 37 years flying for this airline, is missing. A sea search begins in the area of ocean where the explosion took place. Neither body nor wreckage are found. Jane Sato Tomita has started to recover. 7 passengers are seriously hurt, the worst injury a skull fracture. But how have the rest survived? At the moment of decompression, it's just their seatbelts which made the difference between life and death.
They went poof, a loud noise, and it just, the whole thing come apart. And I personally thought we were all gone, and we were fastened, all had our seatbelts fastened. Well, most of us evidently, or would have lost a lot more.
But there's something else. At the most critical moment, Maui's notorious high winds died away.
I was amazed to see front of the fuselage missing. What was so funny about the whole thing is that when it came in, had no wind. Yeah, I believe if you did have that wind, the aircraft wouldn't have made it. It would have split into 2 pieces. And it's a miracle. It's very much a miracle.
This is one of the most remarkable flying events in history. No airplane has ever landed with this amount of damage. The only thing that was holding the forward section cockpit to the rest of the fuselage were the floor beams. Basically, they were hanging by a thread.
From a close study of the fuselage, crash investigators tried to determine how the airplane's structure remained in one piece. The critical factor proves to be the precise location of the explosion.
The thing that saved them was that because the damage was across the top of the airplane, as the nose tried to bend down, these members through here are in tension, and it kept them in line, it kept them straight. So even though it was almost ready to break off, the structure was still strong enough here to keep it together. If this damage had been along the bottom, and the nose is trying to bend down this way, the structure would have been, this similar structure would have been in compression, and it would have buckled, and the nose would have certainly come off. So it was fortunate that the damage was across the top.
How does the roof of a jet airliner simply blow away? The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is tasked with discovering what happened. Investigators pull the airplane's records, something like an automobile service history, and suspicion falls right away on the airplane itself. The best evidence for what happened, the missing fuselage section, is now lying at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. But by carefully piecing together the clues they do have, investigators hope to solve one of the most spectacular accidents of all time. In the 38 years since its launch in 1967, more than 5,000 737s were sold. Somewhere in the world, a 737 takes off every 5 seconds. The accident airplane was number 152 off the production line, delivered in May 1969. The airplane was designed for a 20-year service life and 75,000 flights. This one had exceeded that number, though many were of short duration. Its fuselage was under constant stress because of pressurization.
The fuselage of the airplane is actually breathing. It expands and contracts depending on altitude. When it's on the ground, it's in a contracted status. When it's at altitude, 24,000 feet, the fuselage expands. So the airplane is constantly cycling. That's pressurization. That will weaken the structure over a long period of time. And given the history of this airplane being a very high cycle airplane, that probably had something to do with weakening the structure of the fuselage.
With thousands of 737s taking to the skies each day, investigators need to be certain what made this one burst apart. An Aloha Airlines Boeing 737 bursts apart in midair over Hawaii. After 13 extraordinary minutes in the air, it makes an emergency landing on the island of Maui. Investigators need to discover what caused this spectacular incident. In Washington, D.C., Jim Wildey is one of the NTSB team who worked the case. His expertise as a metallurgist proves crucial.
I got a call about 2 in the morning, in the middle of the night, from my boss, and there had been an accident in Hawaii. They were putting the team together. I hopped on a plane and went to Hawaii.
He takes samples from the remaining fuselage and back in the lab discovers something barely visible to the naked eye. Hairline cracks like this, beside the holes where rivets had been. Figuring out how those cracks came to be there means going back to basics, to the way the Boeing 737 was put together. Airplanes are built from many separate panels. Where they overlap, they're bonded together by a powerful adhesive known as epoxy. Rivets hold the panels tight together while the epoxy sets hard. On the Aloha airplane, there's telltale discoloration inside the overlapping joints. Here is the vital clue.
You can see now where the dark material is the epoxy that was used to bond the 2 layers of the lap joint together. The white material you see here is corrosion damage of the aluminum fuselage skin. So the original intent was that the stress that's trying to pull one skin away from the other skin piece, the stresses would go through the bonding and not through the rivets. Of course, as this thing becomes disbonded, now the rivets themselves are loaded, and especially this top row of rivets, and this is the row of rivets we think that had the fatigue cracking in it that led to the eventual opening of the roof structure on the Aloha 737 airplane.
The files reveal that Boeing warned airlines, including Aloha, of problems with some early 737s. If the epoxy isn't applied at exactly the right temperature, if the panels have moisture or dirt on them, the bonding can fail. In warnings and service bulletins, some issued over 15 years earlier, Boeing spells out the danger. The Hawaii climate with humid and salt-laden air helps corrosion to occur. But instead of grounding airplanes for a nose-to-tail examination, Aloha has inspectors make occasional checks, often at night, when those on duty are least alert, working under artificial light. Those tiny cracks escape detection.
These cracks go unrepaired, and now you have an airplane that is a ticking time bomb.
There are other problems. Boeing's service bulletins and what are called airworthiness directives issued by the Federal Aviation Administration are often difficult to understand.
Airworthiness directives are very complex and read like a legal document. Aloha needed to have someone who could read that document and interpret it into plain English for the mechanics, the wrench turners. That never happened.
An airplane that has been worked so hard, serviced by mechanics who don't fully understand the briefings, is a recipe for disaster. Investigators now believe they know why the airplane burst open, but they don't yet know how.
I was flying back from Hawaii to Los Angeles, and while I was in the air, I got a message that that we needed to interview this passenger who had apparently seen a crack as she was getting on the accident flight.
You saw something as you got on this airplane, which you pointed out to your roommate.
Cynthia Johnson.
Yeah, Cynthia. Yeah. Talk me through it. What did you see?
What I saw was to the right of the door, where the paint was white, well, it was a crack. It was like, not a hole exactly, but the metal on top had come away from the metal below. I was going to tell the flight attendant, you know, but they were busy and we had to take our seats.
Well, yeah, you figured, you know, they know what they're doing. It's their airplane.
I didn't want to make a fuss or anything.
No, absolutely.
The witness saw cracking in this area, and we found fatigue cracking back in here. So this is the line where the fatigue cracking joined up. One piece came down this way and folded off, and the other piece went across the top and came off to the right side.
But something still doesn't make sense. Boeing designed the 737 and other of its aircraft so that this should never happen. Every 10 inches along the airplane are what are called tear straps inside the fuselage to strengthen it. If a tear begins, it should only reach the next strap before shooting off at a 90-degree angle. Though there's a hole in the aircraft, it acts like a safety valve.
The purpose of the tear strip is to confine any kind of rip or tear in the fuselage skin to a 10-inch square, basically. If you allow it to propagate beyond this 10-inch square, you could then compromise larger sections of the fuselage and cause a blowout. The 10-inch square allows a controlled decompression and confines any structural damage to a very small area.
So why has the safety valve failed here? The NTSB believe there were so many cracks in the fuselage that they simply joined together, running right through the tear straps.
The Aloha airplane was kind of unique in a couple of ways. The way it was operated was with very short flights, so you had large numbers of these pressurization cycles, and stress was going on and off on these rivet locations. And secondly, with the disc bonding, all this stress is now going through the rivets, and that led to the linking up of these cracks and then the roof coming off the airplane.
But is that the final answer on what happened to Flight 243? A new theory claims to shed fresh light on those dramatic events. Matt Austin is an engineer who lives in Honolulu. The story of Flight 243 both appalls and fascinates him.
I flew very regularly on Aloha Airlines, and I'd been on that plane about a week before it actually lost the roof. You could tell that something was loose in the airplane. It's just like when you're in an old car and you hit a bump, you can hear the rattles in it that you won't hear in a new aircraft. In this case, when the aircraft landed, there would be noises and rattles you wouldn't hear on the newer aircraft.
He begins his own investigation, scrutinizing the 4,000 pages of evidence and photographs gathered during the official inquiry.
I am an expert in explosion dynamics and how pressure vessels explode, what causes them to explode, which way the cracks run as they're coming apart. In the case of the Aloha accident, the main focus from the aeronautical industry was they were looking at it as an airplane structural failure, whereas I analyzed it from the point of view of a pressure vessel failure.
As he reviews the evidence, one question keeps recurring. Why is CB Lansing sucked out of the aircraft and not her colleague Jane Sato Tomita? Jane was further forward than CB at the crucial moment. Jane was at row 2. CB was at row 5. The NTSB believes the roof separation began near row 3. Passenger testimony gathered shortly after the incident suggests that CB Lansing was sucked upwards and to the left, but not forward.
I was on the aisle, on the right. So I look up from my magazine, I see a pair of legs go up and out on the left, just back of first class. From where I was, if the nose was 12, this is at 11, yeah?
Forensic evidence suggests another possible scenario. Michael Sweet, an ex-cop, is now a specialist in blood spatter analysis. By studying bloodstains at crime scenes, he can help put a killer behind bars or free the innocent. He examines official photographs of the 737 fuselage.
This is a large photograph of the left side of the airplane. The front would be in this location. There's what we suspect to be a bloodstain pattern on the right beside the window, right here.
Could this bloodstain be where CB Lansing's head impacted with the outside of the fuselage? The analyst believes so.
Well, the fact that there are bloodstains on the side of this airplane suggests to me that the blood source in this case was momentarily trapped when it came into contact with the side of the airplane. If the flight attendant in this case was ejected outside of a gaping hole, I would expect her to disappear almost immediately and not leave any bloodstains on the side of the airplane.
This analysis suggests only that she was trapped, but without explaining how or why. Matt Austin believes he has the answer. On April the 28th, 1988, a Boeing 737 owned by Aloha Airlines in Hawaii suffers an explosive decompression in midair. Amazingly, it lands safely with the loss of one crew member. Investigators blame metal fatigue due to poor maintenance. But a new and controversial theory has emerged, challenging at least part of the chain of events. What if a safety hole has opened up as it was designed to do, but directly above the flight attendant? Matt Austin believes CB Lansing is sucked into the safety hole, momentarily blocking it.
All of the air that's trying to escape has no place to go, so it built up a huge pressure spike, and that's what blew the roof off the top of the airplane.
What he's describing is known as a fluid hammer. In scientific terms, air is fluid, as is water. Here's a simple demonstration in a bathtub.
The water is in fact escaping through the drain. As we move the drain plug back down toward the hole, it will immediately slam shut and create a force, which is a simple example of a fluid hammer.
He believes this phenomenon, on a giant scale, caused the accident.
It's very tragic, but if we don't look at the forensic evidence that's left, then we won't understand exactly what caused the explosive decompression and possibly prevent a future occurrence.
The NTSB say that the fluid hammer theory is valid scientifically, but for them the evidence still points to something simpler, a virtually simultaneous failure in the airplane's many weak spots.
The safety board's investigations are never really closed. We always would take into account any new information that comes out. I believe in the case of the Aloha accident, we have not changed our probable cause, and we still are sticking with the probable cause as we determined back in 1988.
Since the crucial physical evidence was never found, what happened on board at the precise moment of explosion will probably never be known. Aloha Airlines management took most of the blame for their poor maintenance regime. The NTSB demanded that the Federal Aviation Administration do a much better job enforcing maintenance standards. Boeing had already improved their manufacturing process to prevent the adhesive becoming so easily contaminated. What happened on Flight 243 made flying safer. Soon after, Congress passed the Aviation Safety Research Act.
This accident had a very profound effect on the aviation industry and the way we look at aging airplanes, old aircraft. We changed the way we monitor how they age, the way we inspect them, and of course now how we manufacture them. We use different processes. This was a very critical accident for aviation history.
Those 13 terrifying minutes also left their impact on the survivors of Flight 243.
I had to go through a healing process. I took fear of flying classes, and the old saying of you fall off a horse and you get back on it is very accurate, but it's a lot tougher to actually do it.
Patricia Aubrey had to find a way of dealing with the memories also. Her way was to revisit the same piece of airspace where the terror unfolded.
I would go flying with my psychologist. You go through what they call desensitization, where you confront your fear and you just do it so many times that you can do it without having a bad reaction. Before that happened, if something bad happened to me, I'd go, I hate life. But I don't hate life. I can deal with it. Bring it on. I'll take care of it. I'd much rather be alive.
There's one further legacy of that fateful day. The ocean never did surrender the body of CB Lansing. Instead, a memorial garden honoring the veteran flight attendant was planted at Honolulu Airport, beneath the big Hawaiian sky where she spent the better part of her life, and where it was so suddenly ended. East of Los Angeles, a calm holiday weekend is shattered by a devastating explosion. A neighborhood is destroyed.
I turned and saw my house totally on fire. All the houses behind me were all on fire.
Where are they? Where are they?
Fiery wreckage is strewn for blocks. Investigators must discover why this airliner crashed and find a way to stop it from ever happening again. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, is one of the busiest in the world. It's used by 40 million passengers each year. More than 1,500 planes take off and land every day. It's August the 31st, 1986, Labor Day weekend. Today, a junior air traffic controller, Walter White, will be handling some of that traffic.
Let's go. That was the big one.
White isn't yet a fully fledged controller. He has to put in more time before he gets his final certification.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Hey, slow, slow, slow. It was a long weekend, and it was a beautiful day in Los Angeles. It was absolutely clear outside, which we call Chamber of Commerce type day.
You want to take a break? Have a cigarette? I can sit in for you.
That was my normal assigned shift, and Walter came in and asked me if I wanted a break, wanted to go smoke a cigarette, and I said, sure.
All right.
Traffic was light, it wasn't very busy, it was Sunday morning.
Well, certainly, any controller is looking to get seasoning, if you will. 3 months, 4 months, that's a pretty new controller.
Los Angeles Approach, good morning.
I mean, it wasn't my turn for a break. Walter wanted to work the sector. As I remember correctly, he wanted to work it for some proficiency time. He hadn't worked it in a while.
East Hill 60, can you see the runway 25 left?
Roger, LA Approach.
Thank you. Reduce speed to 200, then descend and maintain 6,000.
200, descend and maintain 6,000. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Several hundred kilometers to the south, passengers are boarding an Aeromexico DC-9. Dr. Donald Wong and his sons are returning from a highly successful fishing trip.
Jason, I think we should put it up in the kitchen.
They caught an enormous sailfish,
Your mom would love it.
which they plan to display at home.
Labor Day weekend was the last weekend before school was to start. Donald decided that it would be fun to take the boys fishing down in Mexico, to go deep sea fishing, which he'd only done one other time in his life. This would be a father-son bonding weekend. And it was also the first time that they had traveled without me.
Just east of LA, the suburban city of Cerritos wakes up slowly. In the 1970s, this bustling community had been one of the fastest growing in Los Angeles County.
My husband had been working out of town all week, and he was coming home for the weekend. And that Sunday morning, I decided, let's just stay home, not go to church.
I'm gonna go out and get your favorite things for a good breakfast. Javier, go and take a shower.
And I left to go to the grocery store. In the home was Alex. He was 14. His twin sister, Angelica. She was asleep. He was asleep still. And Javier, that was my 16-year-old. And my husband.
As Estrada leaves on her errand, Aeromexico Flight 498 is just 20 minutes from LA. Captain Antonio Valdez-Prom is acting as co-pilot as they approach the city. First Officer Jose Valencia is piloting this leg of their journey.
Ready when you are, Cap.
About 22 kilometers south of LAX sits the Torrance Airport. Operating in the mammoth shadow of LAX, Torrance serves private planes and amateur pilots. It's one of several small airports that operate near LA, a region that has over 6,000 weekend flyers.
Fuel set.
At the end of a busy summer, William Kramer, his daughter Caroline, and wife Kathleen are finally taking to the skies.
Piper 4891.
All clear for takeoff. Good morning, Piper 4891. This is Torrance Tower. You're clear for takeoff from runway 5.
They're heading to Big Bear Lake,
Rolling tower.
about 200 kilometers northeast. A meticulous man, William Kramer is an executive for an engineering company. 6 years ago, at the age of 47, Kramer bought his first airplane, a stylish and swift Piper Cherokee.
Wings west 5225, Los Angeles approach, depart Sealed Beach, heading 320. Expect a visual approach, runway 25 left. Report airport in sight. Thanks.
Walter White's job as arrivals controller is to make sure incoming planes keep well clear of each other. He's directing them to land on one of two runways.
Aerial approach, runway 25 left. Thank you.
Southeast of LAX, the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 is still a few minutes from their first contact with Walter White. But in the skies above Los Angeles, a deadly series of events is about to unfold. Dozens of people who have never met will be bound together forever in a tragedy that will affect everyone who flies.
Airspeed.
August the 31st, 1986, Labor Day weekend.
All clear for takeoff, Torrance.
Just south of Los Angeles, William Kramer and his family are finally on their way for a long-awaited holiday.
Okay. Just an hour to go, we're in Big Bear Lake. The reporting, visibility of 14 miles today. Pretty good.
As the Torrance Airport recedes behind him, Kramer begins climbing to 3,000 meters on his way northeast to Big Bear Lake. Several kilometers away, a half-full DC-9 from Mexico is approaching Los Angeles International Airport. Less than 2,000 meters below them, Teresa Estrada is driving home with the groceries for a holiday breakfast. Her husband and 3 children are waiting just a few blocks away.
That's it. Holiday's over.
PSA 1765, 12 plus, 1 mile southbound.
It's not a busy morning, and one by one, arrivals controller Walter White guides his planes in safely.
Report airport in sight.
At 11:47 a.m., he gets his first call from Aeromexico Flight 498.
Los Angeles approach, good morning. This is Aeromexico 498.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach, 25 left, final approach course. Do you have information?
Aeromexico Flight 498 is now officially inside what's known as the Terminal Control Area, or TCA. Sometimes referred to as the birdcage, the TCA is a complex piece of three-dimensional airspace around the airport.
It's restricted airspace that's normally found around heavily congested airports or hub airports where the traffic density is extremely high and you need to control the access into and out of that airspace.
Aero Mexico 498, traffic 10 o'clock, 1 mile northbound, altitude unknown.
Roger, 498.
Aero Mexico 498, reduce speed to 190, then descend and maintain 6,000.
As the Aero Mexico plane descends, William Kramer and his family continue climbing.
I hope it's like this when we get to Big Bear.
We should be able to see the ocean by now. Hon, take a look at the map and look around the 4-5 and see if you can see any kind of landmarks that we can use.
Oh, what am I looking for?
Walter White is keeping his eye on the Aero Mexico jet when his attention is abruptly drawn to another plane that's just appeared on his radar. It's not one he's expecting.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton. Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like following.
The pilot of a small Grumman Tiger asks White to help guide him through the crowded terminal control area. Pilots are supposed to contact LAX approach before they enter the controlled airspace. This pilot could be in the path of incoming traffic. But before White can deal with the private plane, he gets a call from the Aero Mexico DC-9.
What speed do you want? We're reducing to 290. No, to 190.
Okay, you can hold what you have, sir.
White decides to give the Aero Mexico jet the runway closest to their gate.
Change in plan, sir. Stand by.
Roger, 498.
With the DC-9 on hold, White turns to the intruder.
Grumman 66 Romeo, squawk 4524. Remain clear of the TCA.
White tells the pilot of the Grumman to use a unique radio channel. But he seems confused.
4, 5, what were the other two numbers?
4524. Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative, we're at 3,400 and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass right off your left above you at
5,000. And we run a lot of jets right through there at 3,500.
Well, what do you suggest I do now?
As the crew of Aero Mexico Flight 498 continue to close in on the airport,
Landing lights.
their DC-9 is rocked by a violent shudder.
Bugs, altimeter bugs.
What was that? Aero Mexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
First Officer Valencia tries desperately to control their dive.
Aero Mexico 498.
Los Angeles approach.
This can't be.
I saw a huge explosion, just the red, vibrant colors of a fire, just huge explosion, like the way a bomb might hit the ground.
White is getting no response from the Aero Mexico jet.
Aero Mexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
And now he can't find it on his radar screen.
I'm sitting there talking with the two departure controllers and not really thinking. I hear Walter say something like,
I think I lost one. Aero Mexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
That immediately got everybody's attention. So I looked at the radars and could hear him calling Aero Mexico 498. Called him several times on the radio. Where was Aero Mexico? At this point, we weren't absolutely sure what had happened.
White calls to an incoming jet for help.
American 333 Heavy.
I want you to take a look around at 11 o'clock. I just lost contact with a DC-9. Let me know if you see anything down there, please.
11 o'clock, 5 miles. What altitude?
He was last assigned 6. He's no longer on my radar scope, American 333 Heavy.
Okay, I see a very large smoke screen off on the left side of the aircraft, about 11 o'clock.
I went down the street to go to my house, and I saw a woman's head. That her body had been cut in a diagonal, and she was just laying there. There was nothing but debris and fires sporadically all over the place, and I could see fire in the whole neighborhood.
Nearby, an engine from a local fire station had been on a training exercise led by Fire Captain Larry Hambleton.
All of a sudden, one of the firemen tapped me on the shoulder and said, "There's a big column of smoke, off to our left." So I picked up the mic and made a guess at the address.
Responding to a large fire north of 91 north of Terminator.
They came back and said, "Well, we've got a report of an airliner down." So I upgraded the response to basically triple what I initially asked for.
I'm calling for a third alarm and 2 air squads east of 183 in Terminator.
As we approached, I realized that in addition to the aircraft parts in the street, there were people, body parts, which changed the complexion of the whole thing.
Derek, get in here. Set up a perimeter. Hello? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
At Los Angeles approach, Walter White, deeply shaken by the crash, is relieved of duty.
I remember watching Walter get up and walk out of the room by himself. And, something inside of me was just, saying, this is not right, this is not right. Somebody's got to go with him.
Tony, he can't go out alone.
I could have been sitting there just as easy as him. And I don't know if I'd have done anything different than he did.
Helicopter news crews are quickly on the scene.
Using for medevacing.
There was a lot of fire in front of me, and my house was just totally on fire.
Frank! Angelica! Javier! Angelica!
And I saw my neighbor.
Where are they?
I said to her, "Rose, where's my family? What happened?" And she goes, "Oh, honey, your family's in here. They're over here. We're looking for you." And within myself, all I could do was thank God that they were safe and sound. She took me into her home, and I saw Alex.
Alex? Alex! What happened? Where's Angelica? Where's Angelica?
I don't know.
Where's Javier? Where's Papa?
I don't know, Mom. I'm sorry. I don't know, Mom.
And he started crying right away and said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm the only one that came out alive." And all I could do was hug him.
Pieces of fuselage have torn through nearby homes, setting them on fire. The tail section of the jet has been catapulted more than a block from the crash site.
Hello? Is there anybody in here?
As I surveyed the houses and the crash site around me, it was a very surreal experience to stand right there for probably 4 or 5 minutes before anybody else showed up and not see another living soul.
I have got wreckage all over the place. There are no survivors, just fatalities.
You know, I dealt with death on 1 or 2 or 3 people in a residential fire, but never a whole airliner full of people.
Let's go to work, guys.
I don't think I ever saw a whole human being. I gave him the job of finding body parts and wrapping them or covering them with yellow rescue blankets. No matter where it was, ever so small or whatever, you know, a hand or a torso or a leg or whatever. That became life to us. It was treated with respect. My memory of the incident is in a muted shade of brown. It's not black and white, it's not vivid color. You know, the grass isn't green, you know, the houses don't have paint. It's all some muted brown shade. And I'm told that that's my brain's way of taking something violent and horrible and softening it a little bit so I can live with it and deal with it.
This neighborhood has just been torn apart. Yellow sheets mark the bodies. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bodies right now. Oh, gosh. This neighborhood has just been devastated.
16 houses have been damaged, many of them completely destroyed. At Los Angeles International Airport, Mary Wong is waiting for her husband and 2 young sons.
I went to the airport to pick them up around noon and waited in that area outside of customs and waited and probably, you know, you're thinking customs might take a little while, but about maybe 12:20 or 12:30, I started seeing a man walk around with a pack on his back with a green cross. We were taken up to a lounge upstairs, and on the elevator up, I looked at the man and I said, "They're dead." I said, "I just know they're gone."
In Cerritos, emergency workers are shocked by another grisly discovery. In the playground of a local school, they find the wreckage of a Piper Cherokee Archer. Remarkably intact, the plane's canopy is sliced off. Its 3 occupants are found still belted into their seats. William Kramer and his family are dead. All the passengers and crew on Aeromexico Flight 498 are also dead. In addition, 15 people on the ground have been killed. It's a horrifying situation. 2 planes have crashed into a California neighborhood. Something's gone terribly wrong in the skies above one of the busiest airports in the world. Now investigators have to find out exactly what happened. On the last day of August in 1986, a lazy Labor Day weekend is shattered by an enormous explosion. Two planes crash in LA County, destroying several houses. It's a grisly scene. Bodies are scattered throughout a devastated neighborhood. 82 people are dead. 15 people on the ground have been killed. Another 67 have died in the tangled wreckage of the 2 planes involved. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrive that night. They include experts in human performance, flight systems, and air traffic control. From the beginning, investigators are focused on the fact that there are 2 planes on the ground. It suggests a disturbing conclusion, that this was a mid-air collision.
The idea that this had been a mid-air collision was already conveyed to us before we even launched out of Hangar 6 back when we got to word. They saw 2 wreckages coming down, and that's the way it got conveyed to us.
With that idea in mind, John White and his team must painstakingly examine the wreckage.
It's more of now documenting where the major pieces were, and then looking at the pieces to see if you can determine how the aircraft, at what angle the aircraft may have come together at.
Propeller marks on the tail of the DC-9 and paint from the Piper Cherokee reveal how the planes crashed.
It looks like the Piper collided at the tail section of the DC-9, and the horizontal stabilizer came off. And once that happened, you could no longer control the pitch of the DC-9.
The descending DC-9 and the climbing Cherokee met at a 90-degree angle. Their combined speed was 450 kilometers an hour. The impact tore off the airliner's tail section. Discovering how the planes collided is the first step. The more important question to be answered is why. To piece together the tragedy, investigators examine the DC-9's flight data recorder. It helps them pinpoint the exact location and altitude of Aeromexico Flight 498. The DC-9 was inside the terminal control area, the controlled airspace of the Los Angeles airport. It was right where it was supposed to be. But the Kramer's Cherokee was also inside the TCA. With all of the jets taking off and landing at LAX, private planes must first get permission to enter this area.
Piper 4891, all clear for takeoff, Torrance.
William Kramer was a newcomer to Los Angeles, but investigators learned that he was well aware of the limits imposed by the TCA. He knew that it was restricted airspace. And in the cockpit of Kramer's Cherokee, the confirmation. Investigators find a map of the Los Angeles terminal control area. Investigators make another puzzling discovery. They learn that the Kramer's proposed flight plan took them from Torrance to Long Beach, then up to Ontario, and finally to Big Bear Lake at a cruising altitude of 3,000 meters. That plan keeps him well out of the TCA.
The fact of the matter is that the Cherokee flew into the TCA and hit the DC-9 in restricted airspace without a clearance.
So how had Kramer flown into danger? And why hadn't he let anyone know? On the ground in Cerritos, one possible answer emerges. Heart disease runs in Kramer's family, and the initial autopsy results show a major blockage.
Are you all right, Bill?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Kramer may have suffered a heart attack on the flight, leaving the plane without a pilot. Samples of William Kramer's heart tissue are sent to the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology for testing. If he suffered a heart attack, it might explain why he didn't call in to LA approach.
It's totally possible that he could have had the heart attack, fell back, pulled the airplane up, and that's why he didn't try and avoid the DC-9.
But no matter why Kramer was flying in restricted airspace, Air Traffic Controller Walter White should have been able to see him. Kramer's plane should have appeared on White's radar. Before being questioned by investigators, White reviews the radio calls from that morning. He needs to be sure of what he said and what he saw. Richard Wentworth was one of the investigators who talked to White.
At any time, did you see the Piper Cherokee on your scope?
No. No, sir. The Piper's target was not displayed. It is my belief that it was not on my radar scope.
He was positive that the aircraft was not there for him to see.
NTSB investigators aren't satisfied with White's memory. While the radar data is being analyzed, news arrives from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology about William Kramer's heart.
Are you all right, Bill?
Results from a detailed study of his body show that while he had advanced heart disease, William Kramer was not fighting a heart attack before the collision. Investigators must find another explanation for why the Kramer's flight went into the Los Angeles terminal control area. While he had submitted a flight plan, small planes like Kramer's Cherokee don't have sophisticated instruments. Like most private pilots, Kramer was navigating by landmarks like freeways. That meant keeping an eye both on the landscape below and the airspace around him.
And that's definitely the 405. Where is it again?
Right there.
John Andrews is an aviation expert who testified about the circumstances of the Cerritos disaster.
The pilot of the Piper was navigating by visual landmarks, possibly attempting to follow parallel to a freeway, and that he had become confused about which freeway he should have been following.
New to California, perhaps bewildered by the tangle of freeways below him, Kramer may have flown into the terminal control area without knowing it.
There are no lines on the ground that says the TCA starts here and at this altitude. You have to look at a chart, you have to interpret that.
Investigators are now confident they can explain why Kramer was inside the controlled airspace of the TCA. But when he finally gets a look at the air traffic control radar record, Richard Wentworth is convinced that Walter White should have been able to see the Piper.
We were able to determine that the aircraft that collided with Aeromexico was there to be seen.
So why hadn't White reacted to the Kramer's plane if it was on his radar? When Walter White came to work that day, the arrival station was being controlled by Carl Grundman.
Hey, Carl, how's it going? Hey, slow.
Grundman believes that long-standing radar problems were the reason White didn't see the Kramer's plane.
I can sit in for you.
Controllers have been complaining about the radars for a long time.
Yours, buddy. All right, thanks a lot. Take care.
We had reported problems with the radar not picking up targets several times.
When radar signals strike a target, they bounce back to the receiver. But if buildings or mountains interrupt the radar, the return signal can disappear.
You may lose one target. You may lose two targets. It may not be presented for one sweep.
Did you see the Piper Cherokee on your scope?
No, sir.
But that doesn't mean that the target isn't there. A blind spot is only an instantaneous thing. It's not a continuous thing.
I think I lost one.
There were also holes that were just because the radar was old. It was just not as accurate as it might have been. It was not state-of-the-art equipment, that's for darn sure.
There's an effect called flicker. When a computer becomes overloaded, the scope will flicker. Every now and then, targets will drop out or can drop out. We reviewed that data. We had no evidence that there were any malfunctions of any systems in Los Angeles.
There is another possible explanation. If the Cherokee had appeared on the radar, White still could have missed it. Investigators focus on the other plane in the sky that day, the Grumman Tiger. Private planes are required to contact air traffic control if they're entering the terminal control area. But the Tiger was already deep into the TCA before it radioed Walter White.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton. Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like following.
Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative, we're at 3,400 and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
There was an aircraft that was east of the airport which he became involved in. That was what they called a violator.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass.
The problem with the conversation between the controller and the pilot of the Grumman is that it went on too long.
Why were you so mesmerized by the Grumman?
I thought he posed a risk.
This occurred during a critical time at which the two aircraft to the southwest of his display, which was the Aeromexico and the Cherokee, were merging.
But even if the Cherokee's signal did appear on White's radar, and even if he had seen it, investigators discover that White still would not have had all the information he needed. Radar signals only show controllers that a plane is in range. Transponders on planes can broadcast other information, including height and speed. But at the site of the Cherokee wreckage, investigators discover the plane's transponder is a basic model. It only sends out information on the plane's direction. It provides no information about the plane's altitude.
So these controllers were pretty much used to seeing a little triangle which represented a VFR aircraft with no altitude readout, traversing all over the place. And unless they learned firsthand from the pilot, they had an expectation that the aircraft would not intrude into that airspace.
Grumman 66 Romeo squawk 4524.
Investigators believe that White's divided attention, perhaps made worse by an older radar system, explains why air traffic control never warned the DC-9 of the danger posed by Kramer's Cherokee.
Any landmarks that we might be able to use as a visual.
But there's another mystery that hasn't been solved. Studying the radar records from the day, NTSB investigators are startled by what they find. Neither the crew of the DC-9 nor the pilot of the smaller Cherokee took any evasive action before the crash. Both pilots appear completely unaware of each other.
Definitely the 405.
Why hadn't the pilots of either airplane reacted? Visibility was over 20 kilometers. How could two planes collide in the clear blue sky? To try to get a better sense of what was happening inside the Aeromexico cockpit, investigators listened to the airplane's cockpit voice recorder.
Los Angeles approach, this is Aeromexico 4.
The flight crew had put Walter White on their overhead speakers. The microphone for the cockpit voice recorder was right beside the speakers.
Depart Sealed Beach, heading 320.
Much of what the pilot said was drowned out by White's voice.
Reduce speed to 200, then descend and maintain 6,000.
Altimeter bugs.
The radar information paints a puzzling picture. It indicates that for more than a minute, the Kramer's Cherokee was there to be seen by the Aeromexico crew. And if the Kramers had looked out of their right side window, they would also have seen the Aeromexico jet. But neither plane altered its course. Neither plane took any action to avoid the deadly collision. Investigators believe that if William Kramer was indeed lost and using the freeways as a guide, he might never have seen the approaching DC-9. The window he would have been looking out of was the pilot's window, but the DC-9 was coming from the other direction.
A visual landmark that I can...
This would have been a very unfortunate situation because the DC-9 was approaching from the far right side and in fact could only be seen out the passenger's window, which was on the right side of the aircraft.
For the crew of the DC-9, the very size of the much smaller Cherokee could have prevented them from seeing the plane before it was too late.
In some cases, when a small aircraft is closing very rapidly, by the time the aircraft becomes large enough for you to easily see it, it's almost too late to avoid the collision. The FAA generally has taken sort of as a rule of thumb that you need about 12 seconds in order to see an aircraft, decide that it's a threat, and then execute an avoidance maneuver. In the case of the collision at Cerritos, by the time the aircraft became large enough to see, you were down very close to that 12-second limit. In case after case of mid-air collisions, we find out that the aircraft gave no indication that they saw each other until the time they actually collided.
The design of the cockpit windshield may also have contributed to the disaster.
Hey, Maria.
It's possible that during part of the approach, at least for one of the pilots, the aircraft was actually behind the center post, and unless the pilot moved his head back and forth to clear that airspace, unless he had a reason to do that, it's possible the aircraft was obscured during part of the time in which he might have had a chance of seeing the other aircraft.
Ignition.
The disaster over Cerritos revealed several tragic weaknesses in the air traffic control system. One of the most glaring was that pilots could not be relied on to see and avoid each other. They'd need new technology to keep a mid-air collision from happening again. A small California neighborhood is rocked by a terrifying plane crash. 82 people are killed when a private plane slams into a large passenger jet. The devastation is enormous. More than a dozen houses are damaged, several leveled completely. The NTSB report makes it clear that there are glaring problems across the air traffic system. And these concerns must be addressed before, inevitably, there is another mid-air disaster. The FAA, which regulates the airline industry in the United States, acted swiftly to improve safety. A new kind of transponder was required for smaller planes, the kind that might have helped air traffic controllers recognize that the private aircraft posed a danger.
If you had an aircraft that flew under a controlled airspace, you would have a transponder and you would be required to have altitude encoding or reporting. That way it would be no mistake as to whether you had an intruder or not.
A new system called Mode C Intruder was also developed to warn air traffic controllers.
Mode C Intruder is an automated program that is now incorporated in all our major radar facilities, that if an aircraft should inadvertently intrude, the controller will now be given a visual and an oral alert, thus giving him time to provide a timely warning to the pilot.
In-range check. Seatbelts, engine ignition.
Even for the most diligent pilot, the old strategy of see and avoid had serious limitations. Those limitations would be addressed with the most important innovation of all.
The major technological innovation that came out of the Cerritos Midair was the congressional mandate that all air carrier aircraft operating within the United States would be outfitted with TCAS, Traffic Collision and Avoidance System.
John Andrews worked on the team that developed TCAS.
The TCAS collision avoidance system, which was under development, quite possibly could have prevented this accident. TCAS gives the pilot a traffic advisory at 45 seconds before the potential collision.
Hey, Maria. Everything okay back there?
And then at approximately 25 seconds or so before the potential collision, a resolution advisory is given to actually tell the pilots to climb or descend to avoid the altitude of the other aircraft.
See. Today, commercial airlines around the world use TCAS. The pilot of the Grumman Tiger, the so-called third pilot whose actions may have played a part in the crash, was eventually charged for flying into controlled airspace in a careless and reckless manner. For Walter White, the effect of the disaster over Cerritos could not be overcome.
Walter came back to the TRACON, and I think it was probably a month or so later. And I can't give you exactly how long he stayed there, but it wasn't very long. And he just got up and said, no, no thank you. And as far as I know, he didn't talk to airplanes again.
Within a year of the incident, the old radars at LAX were replaced. In Cerritos, a memorial garden now marks the day of the disaster. Mary Wong has since remarried, but the pain of returning home that day will never go away.
There's nobody here. The house is empty. Derek was already living in an apartment in San Diego, and here I was no longer a mother, except to Derek, and I was no longer a wife. And so it shattered my whole world.
Days after the disaster, Mary Wong met one of the few people who could fully understand her loss.
I went to the memorial service, and it was very important to me to try to meet somebody else who had gone through this. And I knew from reading stories that Teresa had lost her husband and 2 children. And so I saw someone there who I thought was Teresa.
She says, "Are you Teresa Estrada?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Well, my name is Mary Wong." And she says,
I said, "I lost my husband and children also."
I just wanted to grab her and hug her because she was feeling what I was feeling.
So we had an immediate connection, and we've maintained our friendship over these 20 years.
Everyone who flies today has been affected by the mid-air collision over Cerritos. The disaster led to historic improvements in aviation safety. Since the full adoption of the TCAS system, there has not been another mid-air collision in the United States. high above the North Sea. An aging propeller plane tumbles from the sky.
The first headline was sabotage.
Investigators consider a string of possibilities. It takes 2 years to find the cause.
Unbelievable.
It's something that's never been seen in any previous investigation.
They looked at that and said, man, oh man, how could that be?
It would lead to arrests half a world away and call into question the safety of one of the world's most important planes, Air Force One.
It reached all the way to the aviation that flies around the President of the United States.
.30 p.m., September the 8th, 1989.
Oh, hang on.
Knut Tvetem and Finn Petter Berg are flying a charter flight from Oslo, Norway, to the German city of Hamburg.
Partner 394, radar service terminated.
The plane is about 100 kilometers from the Danish coast.
124.55 by partner 394. How was dinner?
Delicious. A little pricey, but delicious.
The two friends have flown around the world together, including remote areas of Africa. They're highly experienced, and both are only months away from retirement.
Copenhagen, good afternoon. Partner 394, flight level.
Partner 394, good afternoon. Radar contact, Copenhagen control.
394.
The plane is flying 22,000 feet above the North Sea. The aircraft they're flying is a twin-prop Convair 340-580. It's a popular plane for short routes like this one. The plane has been chartered by the Norwegian shipping company Wilhelmsen. All 50 passengers are winners of a company lottery, sending them on a free trip to Hamburg to name a new ship.
Some had maybe been to naming ceremonies before, but the naming ceremonies are quite exciting. And the atmosphere was very, very, very good at the time of leaving.
One of the company's best employees is chosen to give a speech at the christening of the ship in Hamburg.
You have to deliver a speech, and it's not so very often that normal person within the company is giving the honor of naming a ship. But it was felt that that was right.
As the Convair crosses the North Sea, a Norwegian Air Force F-16 approaches the plane on its way home.
Whoa, look at that, 11 o'clock.
F-16.
Suddenly, the plane experiences a violent shock. The crew is caught by surprise. The plane begins rolling upside down. Air traffic control notices that Partner 394 is off course and falling from the sky.
Partner 394, Copenhagen control, please report new flight level.
The crew is struggling to save the plane and the lives of everyone on board.
Terrain, what new flight level? Full up. Terrain. Full up.
Please report new flight level.
Then it disappears. It seems as though the charter flight has crashed into the sea.
Partner 394 en route to Hamburg is off radar.
Rescue teams race to the crash site, nearly 20 kilometers north of the Danish coast. They find only wreckage and bodies. All 55 people who were on the flight are dead.
I knew all the people. Some were close friends, some were less close, but I knew them all. And the pressure then felt double.
The shipping company is devastated by the news. Half the staff from its head office has been killed. It's the biggest airline disaster in Norwegian history. The nation is in shock. Jan Ovind is a young reporter for Norway's largest newspaper. He's assigned to cover this story.
One of the inspectors in the Norwegian FAA jumped to the conclusion that it had to be sabotage. And it was also stated by one of the Danish rescue team leaders, who said that they had no distress call. It just fell out of the sky, which meant it had to be a bomb or something. And somebody drew links to Lockerbie the year before.
In December 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland. The evidence in that case is pointing conclusively to a bomb. Norwegian journalists uncover an intriguing fact about the partner plane.
Our Prime Minister at the time, Gro Harlem Brundtland, she used the plane on her campaign trip to the north of Norway. And I guess she used it for 2 or 3 days. And that was just 2 or 3 days before it crashed.
The nation wonders, could the tragedy have been a botched assassination attempt?
The first headline was sabotage then on the whole front page.
A bomb would explain the plane's sudden plunge from the sky. Had the 55 people on board been the innocent victims of a murderer? Investigators looking into the mysterious downing of a passenger jet over the North Sea are facing a stunning possibility: that the plane was deliberately sabotaged. The Norwegian Accident Investigation Board recruits an Air Force investigator, Finn Heimdall, to join the team. It will be a severe test of his investigative skills.
It's good to be here. I started many years ago with the Air Force. And of course, I saw some investigations mishandled terribly, and I thought it can be done better than that.
Investigators hear from several witnesses who lend support to the idea that the plane was sabotaged. A young man claims to have heard a cannon-like sound coming from the crash site off the Danish coast. It may have been the explosion that brought down the partner plane. Searchers scour the surface of the sea for floating debris and for victims of the crash. Eventually, all but 5 bodies are found. They're taken to Denmark for autopsies. Those examinations reveal that some of the victims have small puncture-like wounds. This supports the notion that a bomb brought down Partner Flight 394. An autopsy on the first officer also uncovers something unusual. A complete, unbroken toothpick is discovered in his stomach.
Yeah, that was a odd finding, really, because it was pointed in both ends, and how can you swallow a toothpick like that? So he must have been exposed to a very shocking experience.
Please report new flight level.
But investigators can't confirm that a bomb brought down the plane. They'll need to know more about the final moments of Flight 394.
Partner 394 en route to Hamburg is off radar.
Nine separate radar stations tracked its final seconds. They could provide valuable clues. The most intriguing readings come from a military radar station in Sweden. Operators there tracked the partner flight as it crossed the North Sea.
It started 1436.
The military radar has detected something unexpected. There is another object in the same airspace as the plane. It is not another airplane. It appears as Flight 394 started to plummet from 22,000 feet.
Idea what it is?
Simply didn't know what it was from the beginning. We had no idea what it could have been. It took more than half an hour, something like 38 minutes, and the question was, what is light enough to fall that slowly and solid enough to give radar returns like that?
Whatever the mysterious object was, it now lies at the bottom of the sea. A month after the crash, investigators are busy recovering sunken wreckage. They've plotted the position of the wreckage on the ocean floor using side-scan sonar. It sends out sound waves that are reflected back when they encounter objects. The sonar equipment has painted a remarkably accurate picture of the underwater wreckage. It helps investigators see that the plane parts have settled over a 2-kilometer wide area. It's an important piece of evidence.
It was evident that the aircraft had come apart in the air. It hadn't hit the sea in one piece, that was for sure.
The Midair breakup suggests a bomb brought down the plane. But it will take weeks to prove this. In the meantime, investigators hope the plane's black boxes will provide more immediate insight into the crash. The plane's voice recorder and eventually its data recorder are recovered from the seabed and sent to labs for analysis. Both boxes were damaged in the crash. Investigators hope the damage to the boxes didn't affect the data.
Well, let's see what we got.
The voice recorder may have picked up a conversation between the pilots that can explain what happened on board.
Avionic CVR.
On.
That's required.
Auto feather system.
Armed to 2 green.
The device usually records the final minutes of a flight, but this CVR has done the opposite.
Beta lights off.
Power.
It recorded the start of the flight, but then mysteriously stopped recording just before the plane took off.
Well, it had recorded the conversation on the ground, but as soon as the engines were upshifted to normal RPM for takeoff, it ceased operations. So that was a disappointment to us.
But the malfunctioning CVR did pick up an intriguing exchange between the two pilots.
How's the weather in Hamburg?
It's clear skies, good visibility.
Hope it stays that way.
The CVR does tell investigators that Flight 394 began with an unusual problem.
Partner was in financial dire straits, and we found out that just a few hours before the plane took off, the Norwegian aviation authorities sent out a telex to tell all the airports in Norway to don't let a partner plane take off because they owe a lot of money in non-paid charges and fees.
They won't release us for takeoff until we pay the catering bill.
How much you got on you?
Seriously?
Huh?
Probably enough, actually. I'll take care of it then.
The first officer was forced to leave the cockpit to pay the caterers for onboard meals. Investigators check maintenance records to find out why the CVR only recorded the crew's conversation while they were on the ground. They discover that the plane's cockpit voice recorder had been modified more than 10 years earlier.
Modified to switch to primary AC.
Mayday lights up. It was altered so that when the engines were given full power for takeoff,
Your power.
the CVR would automatically switch from the plane's batteries to its generator.
And that modification was not working on this aircraft.
Neither pilot realized that as the engines were revved up for takeoff, power to the CVR was actually cut off.
Anytime you get key investigation components such as the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder that don't work correctly, it brings into question the thoroughness of the maintenance and also the continued operation, safe operation of the airplanes.
The malfunctioning voice recorder and the unpaid catering bill lead investigators to look more closely at the history of the airplane and the company that owned it, Partner Airlines. Partner operated a fleet of mostly older planes that flew to northern European destinations. The Convair that crashed into the North Sea was one of the airline's most recent acquisitions. But the plane itself was 36 years old. It had a complicated history of both ownership and modification. The biggest change was to the plane's engines.
The really important modification was upgrading the engines to turbine engines.
On prop planes, the propeller moves air backwards, propelling the plane forward. Early prop planes used piston engines to turn the propeller. But turbine engines, which use a series of fans, not pistons, to compress air, generate substantially more power. Heimdall learns that in 1960, the plane's original piston engines were removed and powerful new turboprops were bolted to the wings. It's a modification that provides more power, but could pose a risk.
When there was a tremendous increase of horsepower installing the turbine engines, I was wondering what that was doing to the structure of the aircraft.
Heimdall has been placed in charge of analyzing the plane's engines. He wants to know if the turbine engines could have torn the aging plane apart.
I started asking the question, how can an aircraft fly itself to pieces in midair?
The plane's flight data recorder should tell investigators about the operation of the engines in the moment before the crash. The recorder from this flight is a primitive analog model.
Used a metal foil strip that rotated, and some marking pins actually scratched on the metal surface, on the piece of metal.
The antiquated data recorder proves to be another frustration for investigators. It didn't record many of the parameters it was supposed to. But more mysteriously, the needle seems to have recorded certain signals twice. The double line confounds experts who analyze the device.
We had no experience with anything like that. We contacted several experts, but none had experience with this before.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
The flight data doesn't offer investigators any immediate revelations about the crash. Heimdall now wonders if the very fact that the recorder was malfunctioning could be a clue in itself. He decides to send the flight data recorder back to the American company that made it for further analysis. Investigators painstakingly reconstruct the Partner plane.
The Norwegian team recovered the airplane with assistance from the local authorities, the Danish authorities, I believe, and decided to reconstruct the airplane. A reconstruction is like putting together a puzzle that helps investigators focus the investigation on areas that need to be looked at and helps prioritize the investigation.
As the fuselage takes shape, the reconstructed plane provides investigators with some stunning evidence.
The only thing that would destroy the aircraft at cruising level would be an explosion. So, and some of the parts looked maybe a bit suspicious.
Suspicious for what's on them.
There were rumors that it was found explosives in the partner plane.
There are traces of a powerful military explosive. The amount is small, but the press gets wind of it. The explosive residue could be from a bomb on board the plane, or from another source. A NATO war exercise called Operation Sharp Spear was taking place that same day near the flight path of Flight 394.
One of the pilots I talked to, and he said, I guess it might have been the so-called cold rocket, test rocket, might have gone through one of the wings or the fuselage.
Many people now wonder if an errant warhead played a role in bringing down the plane.
Pull up, terrain. Pull up, terrain. Pull up.
But when the explosive residue is analyzed, it's found not to have been from a bomb or a warhead. There simply isn't enough of it on the plane.
There was a small sign of explosives, but that was a very low level and looked more like a contamination than anything else.
Many battles have been fought off the Danish coast. The sea is littered with old munitions. Investigators believe the plane picked up some explosive residue while lying on the ocean floor. Explosives are ruled out as a cause of this crash. Metallurgist Terry Heaslip has been brought in. He examines the plane's reconstructed tail and makes a startling observation. Pieces of the plane's skin show evidence of damage from overheating.
Which means that it was flexing. And you take a coat hanger and you go like that, back and forth. If you hold it close to where it's going to break, you'll burn your hand because you develop heat where you're doing the fatiguing. It's the same thing on an airplane.
The evidence is pointing to a problem with the plane's tail. Investigators are keen to look at a massive generator recovered from the rear of the aircraft. The auxiliary power unit is housed inside the Convair's rear fin. It's a backup power generator that's usually only used while the plane is on the ground. Heimdall inspects the device and discovers that some melted plastic parts from the plane's cabin have found their way inside the APU's turbine. It gives him an important new piece of information about what was happening on the plane at the moment it failed.
Meaning that the cabin had failed when the APU was still operating.
The APU should not have been running while the plane was in the air. The fact that it was means the APU could be behind this crash. Investigators try to learn more about what happened on the day of the crash. They interview the mechanic who inspected the plane that morning. He reports that one of the plane's two main generators wasn't working, and that he wasn't able to repair it. Regulations demand that the plane have two sources of power before it's allowed to take off. The first officer comes up with a solution that will allow the flight to leave. He tells the airline that he will use the auxiliary power unit throughout the flight as a substitute for the malfunctioning main generator.
Okay, I want you to write this in the logbook. Released for flight with APU generator operative. We'll use the APU to power the left side AC system. APU is coming on. Beta lights off.
Your power.
During his inspection of the APU, Heimdall makes an important discovery.
When I saw the part, I saw that it was not an aircraft standard part at all. It was made in a very primitive way by a piece of iron and welding it together in a substandard way.
He notices that one of the mounts attaching the APU to the plane is broken. The unit contains a rapidly spinning turbine that generates electricity. If it wasn't properly held in place, it could have caused this crash. Investigators need to know if the broken APU caused the crash. They'll soon discover that it's just a piece of a much more troubling puzzle. Investigators have discovered that Partner Flight 394 was flying with a broken APU mount. Metallurgist Terry Heaslip performs extensive testing on the failed part.
My initial reaction was that the welding was bad, was probably inappropriate.
Heaslip wants to know when the strut broke. If it happened during the plane's last flight, it could explain the accident.
I could see the impact markings and the progression markings on it that showed that it did not fail in a single overload during this last accident flight.
The way the broken mount is worn down also tells Heaslip that the mount holding the APU in place didn't break on the day of the accident. It was broken long before Flight 394 took off. Investigators now need to know what effect the broken mount had on the flight.
40,000 RPMs. Do a lot of damage.
The APU is a large gyroscope having a tremendous amount of energy in it when it's rotating. And if that energy is transmitted to the surroundings, the fuselage, the structure, it could impact the whole vibration pattern in the tail.
Investigators want to know if anyone had felt vibrations on this particular plane. Interviews with people who flew on it provide some answers.
Listen, we appreciate your coming in. Thanks a lot. Now, you said you felt some rumbling on the plane, is that right?
One person stated that the plane that crashed vibrated far more than the two other Convairs owned by the company.
Did anything seem unusual on the plane?
But others failed to mention the vibrations.
Had a good flight.
It's a puzzling situation. Investigators know the APU mount was broken before the flight, but they still don't know if it even played a role in the crash, or whether it would have affected the plane's tail. Then the reconstruction begins to clear things up. Heimdall discovers that two doors from the plane's tail have not been found.
When we reassembled the parts from the tail, we saw that the rudder had been torn apart in two major pieces and some parts were missing. In particular, the doors between the fin and the rudder were missing.
The shroud doors are two small doors located on the vertical fin of the plane. They provide mechanics with access to weights inside the fin that control the rudder's movement. Heimdall makes a dramatic find about the doors themselves. They were constructed with an aluminium honeycomb liner. From his days in the Air Force, Heimdall knows they have a unique property.
This is thin aluminum foil, as you know, and it has the good reflective properties for radar, and it's very light. The military use it to disturb radar signals, call it chaff.
Investigators now realize that the unidentified object picked up by Swedish radar was probably a piece of one of the shroud doors.
But when we connected the missing doors and honeycomb with the radar data, we knew that it had happened up at cruising altitude, because the slow-falling object had come from very high level, cruising altitude practically.
Investigators conclude that the tail began to break apart at 22,000 feet before it plummeted from the sky. But why had the doors fallen off in mid-flight? Whatever caused the shroud doors to tear off likely caused the crash. Investigators know that the rudder's counterweights are located just inside the shroud doors. If a rudder moves too violently from side to side, the weights do as well.
We found enough pieces to show that it was just pounding these doors. And the first real components that came off were the honeycomb in those doors.
Investigators conclude that around the time of the accident, something caused the rudder to swing violently back and forth, but they still don't know what.
The APU with the broken front shock mount on its own, running in flight, would not cause the aircraft to come apart and the tail to come apart. There had to be extra factors there for that to occur.
Investigators continue searching for those extra factors. Then Partner Airlines proposes one. They point to the F-16 that passed over the plane just minutes before the plane veered off course.
Whoa, look at that, 11 o'clock.
F-16.
Partner claims the military jet was flying faster than it should have been. They also believe that it came much closer to the flight than officially reported.
Partner, they contacted the Swedish investigator, and he came out with the answer that the F-16 could probably have gone through the sound barrier as it passed just over the partner plane. When a fighter jet or any other plane breaks the sound barrier, you have this pressure wave, and their theory was that this pressure wave just got the plane to disintegrate in the air.
But the Norwegian F-16 pilot testifies that he was more than 1,000 feet above the Convair when he passed it. Investigators calculate just how close the F-16 would have had to be in order to seriously disturb Flight 394. They determined that for the F-16's pressure wave to have affected the Convair, it would have had to fly within a few meters of the plane. There's no evidence the two planes were ever that close.
Okay, good work.
90% of the plane's wreckage has been recovered from the sea. But investigators still don't know what caused the Convair's tail to come off in midair. During the course of the investigation, Finn Heimdall is given a promotion, but he has no idea how to solve the puzzle that haunts his nation.
They asked me to be in charge of the rest of the hardware investigation. I was standing in a heap of wrecked parts and thinking I'll never get to an end of this.
Investigators get a break when the faulty flight data recorder is analyzed in the United States. The manufacturer has asked its top expert to come out of retirement and examine the device.
Manufacturer Fairchild referred us to a previous employee, and we found him in California.
The expert tells investigators that the needle that was supposed to be recording the plane's altitude was shaking so much that it was leaving another mark on the foil. But then he goes one step further. The FDR has a capacity to record for hundreds of hours. By unspooling the metal foil completely, he sees that the FDR has been vibrating severely for months.
We saw that this had happened something like 360 operations hours before the accident.
I had never seen an abnormality like that before, and it took us a while to figure out what was going on here.
It now seems the APU wasn't the only thing vibrating on this plane. Investigators decide to chart the history of the vibrations chronologically. They notice an unusual change in the pattern of vibrations. 2 months before the crash, the vibrations suddenly stopped for a number of weeks.
Virtually no vibrations for at least 16 flights.
It was increasing intensity and frequency up to the summer of '89. And then the pattern changed.
After getting better, the pattern of vibrations got worse again, right up until the crash.
What happened here?
Investigators now need to find out what changed on the plane during the 2-week period when the vibrations stopped.
Why was it out of service? Where was the work done?
The airline tells investigators that during that time, the plane was receiving a major overhaul in Western Canada.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
The work was done by the plane's previous owner, a Canadian company that specializes in servicing Convairs. During the various test flights there, the FDR recorded almost no excessive vibrations. This healthy pattern continued on several passenger flights once the overhaul was done and the plane returned to Norway. Investigators review the maintenance records. Heimdall finds that during the overhaul, mechanics found signs of wear on one of the 4 bolts that connect the vertical fin to the plane's tail. These 4 bolts are the only things holding the tail to the fuselage. During the overhaul of the Convair in July of 1989, a mechanic replaced one of the 4 bolts. The information from the flight data recorder reveals that the vibrations in the tail stopped right after that 1 bolt was replaced.
You see that? And as they go across.
Incredibly, investigators are able to recover all 4 of the bolts which were holding the tail in place. Terry Heaslip thoroughly analyzes the bolts. He makes a final stunning discovery. The 3 bolts that weren't replaced were not approved parts.
We did metallurgical testing and we did mechanical testing. And by doing all of these analyses, we worked out that the 3 of the assemblies were not up to scratch. They were bogus assemblies.
His analysis shows that the faulty bolts were incorrectly heat-treated when they were made. As a result, they are only 60% as strong as they should have been. Investigators finally know why the tail was vibrating for months.
Got something for me?
3 of the bolts holding it in place were too weak.
They just weren't hard enough.
Unbelievable.
3 bolts holding the tail to the rest of the plane were not authentic parts. They were well-disguised fakes. The weak bolts mean investigators now must answer a critical question.
Why didn't the tail come off in the previous 16 flights where it vibrated excessively? Why this last flight?
Investigators already know that on the day of the accident flight, a power generator wasn't working, and that the pilots improvised a solution.
Okay, I want you to write this in the logbook. Released for flight with APU generator operative. We'll use the APU to power the left side AC system. APU is coming on.
The pilots didn't realize that the APU mount was broken and the motor was vibrating considerably. Their decision to run it throughout the flight made a bad situation worse.
The reason why things got bad on this particular flight is that the APU was literally floating on 2 mounts instead of 3.
This, along with the faulty bolts, created even more vibrations in the tail of the plane.
And when you get the two of them shaking, if they ever get into sync, what we call resonance with each other, disaster.
The investigators conclude that the vibrations in the tail and the vibrations from the APU could have combined into a lethal force.
Now, this is what we got from the guys at MIT. Technically, the vibrations could have torn the plane apart.
If the two loose items start to vibrate in the same frequency, now you're going to get, or a multiple of that frequency, you get what's called coupled harmonics. And the one vibration is feeding the other one. They're feeding each other and making each other worse and worse.
The most famous example of coupled harmonics occurred on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State in 1940. The newly built steel and concrete bridge began swaying lengthwise, and then a crosswind started dipping it left to right. The two vibrations moving in different directions combined to create a violent twisting motion that tore the bridge apart. Investigators calculate that the same effect tore apart Flight 394.
And we said, my gosh, that's exactly the phenomenon we have here.
This lethal combination of vibrations caused the tail to sway back and forth so violently that the rudder jammed to the left. This forced the plane into a left turn so abrupt that it increased airflow over the right wing, creating greater lift and causing the aircraft to roll. The plane recovered briefly, but the rudder jams to the left again, and the shroud doors explode. It rolls a second time. The tail begins to disintegrate. After that, the crew didn't have a hope. Investigators conclude that it was the 3 bogus bolts that initiated the partner crash.
And I looked at that and said, man, oh man, how could that be in a crucial component, a crucial fitting like that in the tail? I couldn't believe it.
The report on Partner Flight 394 sends shockwaves throughout the aviation industry. It's the first time that a fatal plane crash has been linked to unapproved spare parts. It raises a frightening question. How many of the parts being put into planes around the world are bogus?
The Partner crash, that was the seminal event that started people actually having to recognize the unapproved parts problem and the fact that the worldwide inventories of aircraft parts, in fact, were contaminated.
There are 6 million moving parts on a 747 alone. The spare parts business is a $45 billion industry. And at the time of the crash, that industry was largely unregulated. Mary Schiavo is the former Inspector General of the Department of Transportation, the agency that oversees the FAA.
No one knew how large the problem was. They knew it was a problem because of a crash, but how big was the problem in the United States? So we set out to measure it. We started by auditing the FAA's own parts bins. And the FAA's own parts bins contained 39% bogus parts. What we found is if the parts had come from a parts broker, which was a huge percentage of the parts supply industry, 95% of them were not authentic.
The FAA would soon find bogus parts on an airplane widely considered to be the most secure plane on Earth. There are 5,000 parts brokers in the United States, many of them in the Miami area.
Parts brokers had no regulation whatsoever. You had a telephone and a fax. You were a parts broker. Overnight, you could be in the parts brokerage business, and you could get them anywhere you chose. You could get them from junkyards, you could get them from scrap facilities, you could get it from old planes, you could get them from crashes, you could get them from people who are willing to manufacture and don't care about the law.
Spare parts for airplanes are expensive. A single bolt, like the one holding on the Partner Flight's vertical fin, can cost up to $250. A Bogus one can cost as little as $30.
Which makes it a bargain. And when you have situations like you have today, and airlines are bottom line driven, and you've got 8 or 10 major airlines in the United States, for example, that are on the verge of bankruptcy, they're looking to cut costs.
The FAA launches a major investigation into illegal parts and uses sting operations to uncover unscrupulous dealers. Investigators uncover a black market industry that makes thousands of worn and inferior parts look brand new.
These are really good counterfeits. It's very difficult to tell.
At the time of the Partner accident, there were checks and balances in the system that were supposed to keep bogus parts from getting on major airlines. For instance, each spare part needs someone's signature to verify its authenticity.
It has to have some documentation that states that it's airworthy. It has to have a maintenance release by some certificated entity.
But investigators discover that in addition to a huge market in spare parts, there's also a burgeoning market for counterfeit FAA tags.
We'd execute search warrants and find that people had printed stacks of fake yellow tags, and in many cases they'd sign with the name of an actual inspector, but they just forged the signature.
The tag in this business is worth more than the part.
At first, investigators believe the problem is mostly with smaller airlines.
Smaller operators and repair stations are usually the people who are most vulnerable to this aftermarket broker parts problem.
They're shocked when they discover that bogus parts have been found on what is supposed to be the most tightly controlled plane in the world, Air Force One.
It reached all the way to what many people consider literally the highest levels of aviation, the aviation that flies around the President of the United States. Supposedly in an airtight supply chain, we had bogus parts cases that touched those aircraft.
The FAA responds quickly. More than 100 dealers are arrested.
With every conviction, we were able to raise the level of awareness, not only of the problem, but of the severe consequences if you want to risk somebody's life. And I actually think that the most important thing that we did was get criminal convictions.
As a result of their investigation, the FAA institutes a much more rigorous system for documenting airplane parts. They threaten airlines with criminal charges if they knowingly accept bogus parts.
Things are different today because we have a whole body of regulations, much more than we had in the 80s and 90s even, to address the problem.
You have to get the mechanic who's actually got the wrench in his hand to a point of sophistication where he's knowledgeable enough to smell a bad part, to smell a bad piece of paper. And it is possible to do.
The new regulations achieved their goal. In the 2 decades following the crash of Partner 394, there wasn't a single fatal accident attributed to bogus parts. Years after the Partner crash, Finn Heimdall became the head of the Norwegian Accident Investigation Board.
My friend.
It was a major puzzle that an aircraft, for no obvious reason, could more or less disintegrate in midair.
His report into the accident resulted in major changes that likely saved lives.
That's the positive thing, but the negative, of course, is the tragedy, the personal tragedy to many people.
One of the smallest parts on a Norwegian charter plane failed in 1989. Because investigators found the cause of that accident, passengers around the world are safer. less likely to be on a plane that's fitted with bogus parts. "35,000 feet above the Sea of Japan.
Korean Air 007, unreadable, unreadable.
We're experiencing rapid decompression. Descent to 10,000.
The pilots have lost control of their plane.
Speed brake is coming out.
A 747 with 269 people on board plunges towards the sea.
Within hours, the story began circulating in Washington that the Soviets have been involved.
This shocking incident escalates tension between two bitter rivals. The investigation is mired in secrecy and deception. It's up to investigators to find the answer before the crash of a passenger jet leads to an all-out war.
Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
It's just after 2 in the morning aboard KAL Flight 007.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
After a brief layover in Anchorage, a Korean Airlines 747 is on its way to Seoul. The marathon flight originated in New York 13 hours ago. Captain Chun Byung-in has nearly 11 years' experience flying for Korean Airlines. Before that, he served 10 years in the Korean Air Force. This leg of the flight is a 6,100-kilometer journey over the North Pacific. Once the plane is in the air, there is very little for the pilots to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Many of the passengers plan to take connecting flights to other destinations after landing in Seoul. Mary Jane Hendry is heading to Japan to start a new life.
My sister Mary Jane found a job and she'd gotten hired by this Kara company. She was exactly the kind of person that they needed for their company in Tokyo. So she was leaving to embark on this new stage of her career.
Just 15 minutes behind them is the plane's sister flight, KAL 015.
Korean Air 007.
Go ahead, Korean Air 015.
What are you doing?
The flight crews chat to help pass the time.
Go see the leaves.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
In an effort to conserve fuel, the crew decides to take the plane to a higher altitude.
Tokyo Center, Korean Air 007.
Korean Air 007 Tokyo.
Korean Air 007 requests climb 350.
Roger, standby. Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Roger, Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Then, without warning, the plane is out of control.
What happened?
Charge throttles.
Landing gear.
Landing gear.
The crew extends the landing gear in an effort to stop the plane from climbing.
Altitude is going up. Altitude is going up. Altitude is going up. Speed brake is coming out. I can't descend.
This isn't working. This isn't working. Engines are normal, sir.
Is it rapid decompression?
Tokyo Center, Korean Air 007.
Korean Air 007 Tokyo.
We are experiencing rapid decompression. Descent to 10,000.
Korean Air 007, unreadable, unreadable. Radio check on 10048.
Stand by, stand by, stand by.
Headband. Emergency descent.
Korean Air 007 Tokyo.
Korean Airlines Flight 007 and all 269 people on board have vanished.
Korean Air 015, would you attempt to contact Korean Air 007, please, and relay position?
All efforts to contact the flight have failed. Tokyo makes calls to other radar stations in Japan and Korea.
I cannot contact Korean Air 007.
A call is even made to a radar facility in the Soviet Union. Relatives nervously await news of the missing flight.
The company that Mary Jane was going to work for, they apparently had phoned and said Mary Jane's plane hadn't arrived and that something had perhaps gone wrong with the plane. But at that point, we didn't really know anything.
There was concern that it had been either forced to land or crashed, or within hours, the story began circulating in Washington that the Soviets had been involved.
As the world waits for news about the incident, US military officials make a horrible discovery. At a top-secret surveillance facility, they've been monitoring Soviet transmissions. It appears the unthinkable has happened. At the time of the flight's disappearance, US soldiers heard what they thought was a routine Soviet training mission.
При нарушении государственной границы приблизиться к цели и уничтожить.
It doesn't seem possible that the Soviets would actually shoot down a passenger plane. But American officials have little doubt. The next morning, US Secretary of State George Shultz delivers an unusually blunt statement.
The United States reacts with revulsion to this attack. Loss of life appears to be heavy. we can see no excuse whatsoever for this appalling act.
It couldn't be. It couldn't be. How could they all just perish? What do you mean? There must have been a reason.
1983 is the height of the Cold War. Russia and much of Eastern Europe are united by communist ideology. Ruled with an iron fist, the Soviet Union is locked in a bitter political struggle with the West.
Relations were bad, but no one really knew how bad, how dangerously bad they were.
Initially, Soviet officials deny responsibility for the KAL disaster.
The story came out of Moscow was that the plane appeared, we intercepted it, tried to make it stop, it didn't, it flew away. That was the first story.
But soon they reverse course and come clean. A Soviet fighter jet did in fact shoot the plane down, but they insist the attack was justified.
The Soviet view was that it was on a spy mission, perhaps carrying instruments, cameras, recorders, and so forth.
The Soviet Union claims Flight 007 entered highly restricted airspace under orders from the US government. But the US insists KAL 007 was a routine passenger flight. The dispute only heightens political tension.
In terms of an actual shooting war, the closest points that we may have come were in that year, both before and after, when both sides, particularly the Soviet side, though, was expecting an attack.
The KAL disaster would put NATO nuclear disarmament talks in jeopardy. The Soviets would ultimately walk away. The nuclear threat is growing. Under such circumstances, the need for an impartial inquiry is urgent. The UN calls on the International Civil Aviation Organization.
ICAO offers a neutral investigation, an investigation team that can deal with all parties involved in a neutral way.
Kai Frostel joins the international team of investigators that will try to uncover the truth behind the destruction of Flight 007. With two superpowers squaring off, they're under pressure to find answers and find them fast. KAL 007's flight plan should have kept it well away from Soviet airspace. Either it was shot down over international waters, or the flight had strayed off course. Figuring out which is the first priority for investigators. But they face a huge obstacle. The plane's black boxes are still missing.
The lack of flight recorders, data recorder, cockpit voice recorder, that's significant in an investigation.
The Americans joined forces with South Korea and Japan in the search for the crucial devices. But the three allied nations are not the only ones searching.
On September 1st, we got an order to go to the place where the Boeing fell and take part in the search for the Boeing 747.
It's a race to find the black boxes. The Americans know they may never get the truth if the Soviets find the boxes first. Each side accuses the other of dirty tricks.
The U.S. did formally complain that the Soviets would either sail across U.S. ships, that they would drop false pingers to deflect listening devices away from the true pinger.
The Soviets claim Flight 007 was flying in Soviet airspace over Sakhalin Island when they shot it down. If that's true, the aircraft was well outside its designated aerial corridor, a route known as R20.
Across the North Pacific, there are various routes that are labeled that R20 was the one closest to Soviet airspace. The Red Route 1 was a nickname for it. It was the one closest. So it was known to be, or should have been known to be, a route that you took extra precautions on.
Investigators get their first hint that if the crew was flying in restricted airspace, they didn't know it.
The coordinates they were reporting, it put them on course.
The Tokyo air traffic controller who last communicated with Flight 007 tells investigators that all seemed normal.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
The crew reported they were flying the R-20 route. But as with every other flight over the Pacific, 007 was beyond Tokyo's radar range. The controller could only rely on the pilots to verify their position. Perhaps they were mistaken about where they were. That possibility becomes more likely when investigators talk to the crew of the Korean Airlines flight that was just minutes behind Flight 007.
Tell me about the exchange with Flight 007.
The captain of the second flight recounts an odd conversation with the 007 crew.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
We still have a 15-knot headwind.
Could he be getting a headwind if he was here?
It would be almost impossible for one flight to have a tailwind and the other a headwind. Something doesn't add up. But with the black box still missing, investigators have no way of knowing where KAL 007 actually was at the time of that exchange.
That made it very difficult in the way that we had no direct information that I would normally have as an accident investigator.
Frostel gets more information from an unlikely source, the US military. In a rare move, US officials share highly classified surveillance data from the night of the shootdown. A top-secret technology called passive radar can track the movements of every military and civilian plane around the globe. What it reveals about KAL 007 is stunning. The plane was way off course. For almost its entire journey across the Pacific, the flight had been drifting north. By the time it was shot down, Flight 007 was 560 kilometers, or 350 miles north of where it should have been, and had already flown in and out of Soviet territory. The Soviets were telling the truth.
And then it becomes a question of determining why was it off course that much.
To find the answer, investigators turned their attention to the navigation system on board the 747. It's called INS, the Inertial Navigation System.
The INS that was used on this airliner, like most in that time period, had an accuracy of about half a mile of drift per hour. Very accurate. It would get you where you wanted to be.
The system relies on coordinates, or waypoints, entered into the flight controller.
The way it works is that there is 9 waypoints that you put in. That's the way you program it.
59 degrees, 18.0 north.
Waypoints are essentially GPS coordinates that also have one-word names, like Bethel, Neva, or Nippy. Flight 007's INS should have been programmed to find and follow those electronic guideposts to Seoul.
18.0 north.
At 8:49, turn left heading 270.
Perhaps there was some last-minute change in the flight plan. Kai Frostel listens to the pre-flight conversation between the crew and the tower in Alaska.
Net at 473, turn right.
Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 310.
Net at 473, turn right heading 07.
It was total routine from the beginning to the end. There was nothing exceptional with the takeoff or the taxiing to position, the preparation for the flight.
After leaving Anchorage, the 747 flew out over the Pacific just as planned. But it never made it to the first waypoint. Instead, it drifted off course for more than 5 hours. Hope of uncovering the reasons why begins to fade. A 10-week effort to recover the flight recorders has turned up nothing. The search is called off.
The actual aircraft, where it was and how many pieces it was, remained unknown.
With the investigation stalled, Frostel turns to the plane's manufacturers.
The US and Boeing offered to simulate the route that we knew Korean 007 had flown. We went over to Boeing in Seattle, and then Boeing carried out the simulation.
Waypoint number 2, 59 degrees, 18.
Retracing Flight 007's steps in a simulator leaves them with a few possibilities. One is that a mistake was made while entering the coordinates into the INS.
60 degrees, 47.1 north.
Normally the co-pilot would insert the waypoints and the captain would check that the correct digits have been put in.
60 degrees, 47.1 north, check.
Misprogramming the INS at the gate could have taken the plane over the Soviet Union.
Okay, let's try the flight in heading mode now.
A second, less likely possibility is that after programming the waypoint navigation system, the crew may have failed to turn it on.
After takeoff from Anchorage, the aircraft would have used a constant magnetic heading to get to the route.
It's a standard procedure to begin a flight using a magnetic compass heading for direction. Soon after takeoff, pilots must activate the navigation system so it can lock on to the first waypoint.
And if it was forgotten in that constant magnetic heading, it would continue over Soviet airspace.
The magnetic heading would have kept the plane flying in the right direction, but along a very different route than the one planned. Captain Chun was a distinguished pilot with years of experience. Forgetting to switch the autopilot to INS mode would have been an astonishing error. At this point, Frostel can only speculate why Flight 007 was off course. But what's even harder to understand is why the Soviet Union would risk starting a war by shooting a plane down.
The Soviets resorted to deadly force to punish this intruder. It's like shooting the paper boy in your front yard at night because you think he might be breaking into your house.
What could prompt such a response from the Soviets? Investigators get their answer from the US military. Though Flight 007 may not have been on a spy mission that night, another plane was, a US Air Force RC-135.
They were tracking an RC-135, which was doing very, very slow figure eights off the coast with its own listening devices, waiting for a Soviet missile test.
The spy plane was near the Soviet border in the path of the KAL jetliner. When their paths crossed, the two planes may have been indistinguishable on Soviet radar.
When 007 came in over Soviet airspace, the Soviet Union assumed it's an RC-135.
Along came this intruder, and they just fell into the patterns that they had prepared in advance for such an intruder.
Upon violation of state border, approach target and destroy.
But disturbing questions remain. Did the fighter pilot get close enough to see the target with his own eyes? Did he know it was a passenger jet? Requests to speak to fighter pilot Gennady Osipovich are refused. And for the time being at least, those questions are left unanswered. In December 1983, less than 4 months after the disaster, ICAO releases the findings of the investigation. Though lacking hard evidence, the report concludes Flight 007 strayed into Soviet airspace by accident, due to pilot error in operating the navigation system.
I would almost call it the best guess based on all the work and the factual information we had in 1983.
For them to summarize that the plane was there by accident, as far as I'm concerned, that's not the answers we wanted to hear, and we believed that there was further investigation to do.
The key to this mystery remains locked inside the plane's black boxes, which are assumed lost forever beneath the sea. In the months following the KAL disaster, unidentifiable human remains wash ashore in northern Japan. Small pieces of wreckage are also found. Investigators have no doubt that the plane was completely destroyed.
We don't know where their bodies lie. There was clothing that washed up on the shore, her ID washed up on the shore of Japan. Of course, getting that ID back was, at least we had something.
Like the victims' families, investigators have no clear idea where Flight 007 went down. But there are some people who do. Top Soviet officials are hiding the fact that 1 month after the incident, not only did they find the wreckage, they also found the all-important black boxes.
It was a big pile of debris. They took down this pile with their bare hands until they found the black boxes. There were 2 of them.
But the Soviets keep the boxes to themselves. The information is kept locked away. Until nearly 10 years later. After the turn of the decade brings a jubilant end to the Cold War, Glasnost ushers in a new spirit of openness in Russia. Eager to break with the past, the new administration in Moscow decides to go public.
The actual unveiling of the data recorders and black boxes was a total surprise. And suddenly this new material promised some real answers.
So I knew they're gonna tell me something. I wanted to have the facts from the tapes and then see how does those facts compare to what we wrote in 1983.
In 1992, during official ceremonies in Seoul, Russian leader Boris Yeltsin hands over the long-awaited flight recorders.
I was approached by KGB general, and he told me that you probably don't know me, but I have had the recorders for 10 years. I had them in the safe in my office. I knew it was a big international secret. It bothered me tremendously. Every day when I came to the office and I looked at my safe, and I knew the recorders were there. He told me, you may not understand that this is the happiest day in my life.
Kai Frostel is asked to lead the new team of investigators based in Paris. And as a clear indication that the times have changed, Vladimir Kaufman, a Russian avionics expert, joins the team.
Он, так сказать, ничем особо не выделялся. At the time, I was working at the Civil Institute of Aviation and was an air crash investigator. This was an international investigation of a very high level.
Their first task is to make sure the black boxes are authentic.
There was a high suspicion in a lot of quarters that the Russians or the Soviets had tampered with the tapes or had made bogus tapes. And so we had to 110% validate the authenticity of the tape. They had seals on them. They had, I remember, wax seals on them. The photographs were taken, the seals were cut.
Investigators confirm that the CVR handed over by the Russians is the same box that was installed on Flight 007.
They opened them and looked at them and validated the serial numbers, validated the model numbers.
Now that they know they have the right boxes, investigators need to make sure they have not been tampered with. Suspicion soon arises.
During the cleaning process, they noted that there had been some breaks in the tape and had been spliced by the Russians.
It is not uncommon for a tape to break during the impact of a crash. But distrust of the former Soviet Union runs deep.
First, they examined these areas of the splices where it had broken, and they did that on this high magnification photograph. One of the techniques that the French had that I hadn't seen before, it wasn't used in the United States, was a photo analysis machine. They could do this with this optical high magnification. They could actually see the magnetic waves.
The test confirms that no data was added or removed from the cockpit voice recorder when it was spliced together.
565, what was the altimeter again?
Finally, investigators can listen to the tape, confident that every word is authentic.
What? It's already time for breakfast.
What do you know?
Let's eat later.
But all they hear is idle banter from the crew.
On a step 4-8.
I heard there's a currency exchange at the airport.
What kind of money?
Dollars to Korean money.
It's in the domestic building.
Back to 010-48, American 737.
There is not a word on the tape to suggest the crew was on a spy mission.
Just a totally routine conversation, and either these guys are the most cold-blooded actors and falsifiers ever, or they really were totally clueless about where they were. Sadly, I think the latter's the case.
It seems unlikely that KAL-007 was on a spy mission, but it was caught flying over Soviet territory. Investigators have long suspected that the crew either misprogrammed their navigation system or left it in the wrong mode, set on constant magnetic heading. The flight data recorder finally provides the definitive answer.
The data revealed that the aircraft was on constant magnetic heading from soon after takeoff from Anchorage to the end. There was no deviation whatsoever in the magnetic heading.
The crew of KAL-007 never activated the waypoint navigation system.
Gear up.
Landing gear up. Now passing 500.
It seems they simply forgot a basic step in their standard flight procedure.
The INS was functioning properly, had been loaded properly, and was counting along the route where it was thought it was supposed to be. But the autopilot was not following the INS commands. Instead, it was following a compass mode.
So it's only telling them where they're supposed to be.
Investigators learned that even though the plane was following a compass heading and not the waypoints, the computer would have continued to display their intended waypoints even though the plane was nowhere near them.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
This may explain why the crew never noticed their mistake. The crew also didn't notice a key indication that they were badly off course.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 040.
The fact that they were experiencing completely different weather patterns to a plane supposedly minutes behind them should have alerted them to the problem.
Now, there's a point where you see him teetering on the brink of realizing something is horribly wrong. He's talking to the pilot behind him, and the winds are almost 180 degrees apart, and there's a pause, and Chun is somewhere in his mind, as he's a pilot, and he has the instinct, you know, this is odd. Is it a clue to something I should look into? And he doesn't. And at that point, he might as well pull the gun out and put it to his head.
It was human error. A complacent crew in the middle of the night had their flight computer on the wrong setting, and then didn't notice they were straying off course.
Everybody makes mistakes sooner or later. Good pilots make mistakes. Not so good pilot makes mistakes. We're all making mistakes.
When investigators combined the conversation data from Flight 007 with intercepted Soviet transmissions, they get a detailed picture of what went wrong on September the 1st, 1983. The pilots believed they were on course. But 3 hours into the flight, their magnetic heading took them into Soviet airspace over Kamchatka. The Soviet military had been tracking a US reconnaissance plane.
There was a real American spy plane. It was there. There were two planes that looked alike. When KAL penetrated the border, the perception was that this was the plane.
As the passengers sleep through their long journey, the Soviets scramble fighters to intercept the plane.
The identity of the plane was just not known. The clues that it was a lost civilian airliner, well, might have been there. The clues that it was a 135 didn't add up, but the Soviets involved didn't have time to think it through.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
But the fighters are not fast enough. The plane leaves Soviet airspace and continues along its heading to Seoul.
They figured that they'd just been spooked, but that was all over. Unfortunately, for everyone involved, it wasn't.
The airliner is just seconds from flying over the island of Sakhalin.
So Sakhalin was prepared.
KAL Flight 007 enters Soviet airspace for the second time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
Target is on your heading.
I can see it both visually and on the screen.
Major Gennady Osipovich, the lead fighter, makes visual contact with Flight 007.
Give warning burst with cannon.
But the warning shots go unnoticed.
Take up position for attack. Approach target and destroy.
Roger, locked on already. Executed launch. Target is destroyed.
The fighter pilot believed the 747 was an enemy spy plane. It takes nearly a decade after he shot down KAL-007 for that pilot to tell his side of the story. Investigators have long wondered what Major Gennady Osipovich saw and did after he was ordered to intercept an intruding aircraft in 1983. After nearly 10 years and the collapse of the communist regime, he finally tells his side of the story.
I saw the plane. It did look like a civilian plane because there was a flashing light on its tail and one on the top. But you can disguise any plane like this. You can put a flashing light on and you've got a civilian plane. So I did not have any thoughts about this.
Give warning burst with cannon.
When warning shots are fired, they usually include tracers, which are like flares and are easily seen. However, Osipovich had no tracers loaded in his cannon.
They're supposed to load tracers, just no one had shipped them any for the last 6 months, so they weren't there.
But even without the tracers, Osipovich thinks the 747 crew should have seen him.
As I caught up with him, I was flying like this, and he was flying like that. How could he not turn around and see me? I was flying with lights, everything was according to protocol. He should have seen me.
And then a horrible coincidence seals the fate of 269 people aboard the flight.
Korean Air 007 requests climb 350.
Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Like a car going uphill, a climbing plane slows down. But to the fighter pilot following the 747, this is interpreted as an evasive maneuver.
He decreased his speed so that I could either pass him or fall, one of the two. So that's how I knew that he's an enemy intruder.
That convinced him that it was not a civilian plane and that he was in danger.
My only thought was to catch and stop. This is what we were trained to do. I fell a little behind him and banked down, made a snake maneuver, put some distance between us, because otherwise, the rockets would not have locked on.
He's running out of time because the airliner was approaching international waters.
Take up position for attack.
Roger, locked on already. Executed lock.
Osipovich fires 2 air-to-air missiles. They travel 2,000 kilometers an hour towards the jetliner. One of them explodes near the tail, damaging vital controls and hydraulic lines. The warhead also tears a hole in the fuselage, causing a rapid decompression in the cabin.
I saw the first explosion right under the tail, and that's it. The lights of the trespasser went out, and I went home.
Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband. Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
In the time that they lost pressurization to a certain point indicated that the hole would have been approximately 1.75 square feet.
The crew managed to fly the crippled plane for several minutes.
Immediately after the missile impact, the aircraft climbed to flight level 380, and then it descended about 5,000 feet per minute.
The stricken jetliner plummeted towards the Sea of Japan, with most of its passengers likely still conscious.
And that's when the recording stops. Our determination was that the airframe probably broke up at that point.
To this day, Gennady Osipovich is convinced he shot down a spy plane.
I knew they wouldn't order me to intercept if it was a civilian plane or cargo plane. Only if it was a trespasser.
We weren't blaming him, but some families did. They certainly did. They said it was his fault and he pressed the button and he shot them down and they were looking to blame somebody.
It was clear that he was living with what he had done, and what he had done in order for him to live and to sleep was to believe that it was a spy plane, there were no passengers on board, that he had not killed 269 people. And that's the way he wants to believe it, and I'm not going to blame him for wanting to believe that.
In 1993, Kai Frostel has the evidence that he sorely lacked when he issued his first report. He can prove how the Korean pilots blundered and ended up off course, and how the Soviet pilot interpreted the situation. The destruction of Flight 007 is ruled an accident. Frostel recommends that all passenger planes be equipped with a clear indicator that the autopilot is in heading mode.
The tragedy of 007 is that it didn't have to happen. It was not inevitable. It was a series of accidents, a series of misunderstandings, a series of bad decisions that had been primed ahead of time.
When my sister Mary Jane said goodbye to me at the airport, she hugged me so tightly. And I said, Mary Jane, I feel like I'm never going to see you again.
Korean 007 has had a great effect on my life. It has been close to my heart. That has been very sad for me. My sympathy and condolences all these years have gone out to the families.